The world is always full of turmoil. Amidst it all, those blessed by the gods were known as heroes, while the villains, gone after being defeated, turned into evil organizations. This is one of those evil organizations known as Death Shadow. Our story begins in the midst of all this darkness. The name of our protagonist is Serena. She was placed in the 5th training center and is waiting for class to begin, all while thinking she wished she had gone to the 1st training camp instead. The 5th focuses on survival methods, but the 1st focuses on sword fighting, which is what she truly wanted. The training there is tough but pointless, and the instructor is a well-known man. The man arrives asking if these are the new recruits. This man is known as the Ice Devil for his unyielding and harsh demeanor, famous for having the coldest heart in the entire organization. He asks number 23 to step forward. Number 23 wonders if it's really her while stepping forward. As he unsheathes his sword, he tells her to do the same and attack him. Stammering nervously, she does as she's told. She then stands before him in a fighting stance as he extends his sword forward. Serena thinks number 23 seems like a decent swordswoman, and come to think of it, this will be her first time seeing the instructor in action. She understands he's an instructor and all, but he's severely underestimating the students. The casual way he's holding his sword shows he's not even trying to take this seriously. Number 23 draws her sword from the scabbard and charges at the instructor. He fixes his gaze on her, serious as always. With a quick movement, he easily disarms her. The girl ends up on the ground, not understanding what just happened. Then the instructor calls her an imbecile. Standing before her, the instructor asks her to say why she failed to strike him. She says she dropped her sword and screamed. The instructor turns to the other students and asks if anyone has a better answer than that. Silence follows as the students think. Then someone raises their hand, saying it was the swing of 23's sword. The girl looks at her classmates while the person who raised their hand gets ready to finish the sentence. We then see that it was our protagonist who raised her hand, and she completes the sentence by saying that 23 gave up. The instructor asks her why she thinks that. Serena says that one should not draw their sword unless they intend to strike a fatal blow, and that one must aim to walk away alive while the opponent does not. He says the girl isn't stupid, that she's still wrong. Surprised, Serena pays close attention. Taking a step forward, the instructor launches a surprise attack. Serena, sword in hand, sees that he's repeating the same movements that number 23 executed. She manages to quickly defend herself against the instructor's attack. We then see that she managed to pierce the tip of her sword into his shoulder while his sword rests against her neck. The instructor asks her to explain in case she hasn't understood, and she says that when attempting a fatal blow, you also expose yourself to being cut. He then places the tip of his sword against her neck and says she's wrong. The instructor says that the shadow cut they learned is a simple and deadly strike, with no second chances, one that cannot be blocked or dodged while being executed. So Serena asks if it's a single strike. He confirms, saying yes, that's exactly it, and that failure when using this technique means you're done for. The man continues, saying no one should use it unless they have absolute confidence they will land a mortal blow, and he adds that if you fail using that technique, it means you didn't deserve to be alive anyway. Serena, with a thoughtful expression, says she'll keep that in mind. It was on that day that she realized the level of the instructors as he shouted for them to run 20 laps and practice the shadow cut techniques from 1 to 18. He said the students would repeat each one 100 times and not to even think about resting before finishing all of it. Then he called students number 23 and number 7. The instructor said that for them, it would be 30 laps and 150 repetitions each. Smiling slightly, he told them not to say they couldn't do it. Both bravely answered yes. Sometime later, we see all the students running around the field, breathing heavily from exhaustion. That training was extremely harsh, so harsh that it was understandable for people to complain. Serena noticed that the instructor was still standing there, watching the group train instead of going to get treatment for the wound she had caused. Looking at him, she thought the man looked so cold that no one would dare complain to him. She also noticed he hadn't even flinched when he was struck and wondered how strong he really was. While running, she thought she lost because she underestimated him. But thanks to that, she discovered how deadly the technique was and was now one step closer to reviving the Levilee family. And that was how she completely forgot the disappointment of being sent to the 5th training camp and began to think she could learn a lot there. Meanwhile, we see that the instructor was actually in pain, but didn't show it. He paused to reflect that he had already taken a shoulder wound on the first day, and that it hurt like hell. The instructor knew that today he might be a low-ranking villain, but in his prime he shined and no rookie could have handled his power. But that girl, number 7, had managed to stab him in the shoulder. She was an extraordinary woman. He thought that hopeless girl had the potential to be a hero. The man grew angry, thinking he nearly died teaching a class, and thought that girl had the makings of a hero and wondered what she was doing there. The girl noticed the instructor was staring at her and wondered why he was looking at her like that. She gave a little smile, and he wondered why she was smiling while looking at him. Then he thought about how he was standing there full of pain while the girl was laughing as she ran. He was certain she was going to be a problem in his life. While she was thinking she could learn a lot there, the instructor was thinking he'd crush her if she ever tried to climb over him. The protagonist of this story is Cain Ronard, the lowest-ranked villain instructor in Death Shadow, who took that job just to survive. We start by seeing exhausted people on the training field. Number 23 looked worn out at Serena, who continued practicing her strike. The instructor had told her to repeat it 150 times, and she was already on the 132nd repetition. The girl thought, while gasping heavily, that she couldn't do anymore, that she was completely out of strength. But if she gave up at that moment, she looked to the side and saw that the instructor was still watching her. In the instructor's mind, he just wanted to treat the wound she gave him and eat something. But the girl thought that his cold stare only motivated her even more. Lifting her sword, she continued her training. The instructor thought he wasn't gaining anything by staying there so late and wondered why he had to stay there with her. While she took a breath to continue, he was just thinking about stopping, eating, and resting. The girl then felt something strange in her body. She looked at her own trembling hands and her vision began to blur. She then started to bend forward as we saw others sitting on the ground resting. Serena began to stumble and said she just needed to do something. Her body became more and more unstable as she said she was almost done. And finally, she collapsed, falling on her back unconscious. The instructor said that was enough for today, thinking the girl should have just given up instead of making his life so difficult. All the students began leaving, exhausted, but number 23 looked back and turned in that direction. The instructor picked Serena up onto his back while wondering why he had to do that. As he held her, he felt the pain in his injured shoulder and thought he'd make her pay for that. He tossed the girl onto the bed, saying she was too heavy. Looking at her in frustration, he thought that girl was giving him way too much trouble, and that maybe he'd have to get revenge on her. He stared at her lying on the bed for a while. Suddenly, his face twisted into a wicked grin as he thought that yes, he would get his revenge on her properly. Then he thought he'd start by getting rid of her sword. This way she wouldn't be able to fight back. The man began removing the items she had on her, starting with iron stars and small daggers. Next, a vial of poison and a garrote. Lastly, he pulled a knife from the girl's boot, wondering if she was actually a spy. Our girl was still completely unconscious. He crouched beside the bed with a ring in his hand, noticing it had a crest on it. We see a crest that looks like a shield with 3 swords on it, and the instructor recognized it as belonging to the noble family called the Levilees. The man panicked, thinking she was a spy from a noble family, and wondered what he should do that the responsibility would fall on him. He then thought maybe he should bury that secret along with the girl, that it wasn't unusual for people to suffer fatal accidents during training there. He thought that if he were going to send her off, it would have to be done with great precision. He also thought that for a girl with the potential to become a hero like her, this would just be a stepping stone to make her stronger. The girl stirred slightly in her face, but remained unconscious. Someone asked how the father was doing, and another person replied that they were doing everything they could, while questioning how all that spiritual power wasn't enough. One person looked at the blonde girl and asked why she hadn't found a potion specialist. She looked down, troubled, and said she'd think about it. The Free Warriors are an organization without a lord, and the Levilee family created the stone sword, one of the 3 great sword arts. However, the deeper the roots of stone, the easier it is to reshape it, and the stone sword eventually became outdated. The girl's father pushed himself too hard trying to pass on the art, and ended up so ill that even the priests gave up on him. The girl thought, as she walked, that she couldn't let her father's efforts to revive the family be in vain, that as his successor, she had to find a way. She stopped, thinking that if only there were a way to know all 3 great sword arts. Then she realized while unsheathing her sword that she just had to learn them all. Admiring her sword, she thought that the flames of the battlefield could no longer be mastered because the bloodline had been divided, but she might still have a chance with the shadow cut of Death's Shadow. Then someone called out to Serena. She happily heard her father's voice and ran toward it. The girl ran to him and asked if he was okay, and if he hadn't pushed himself too hard just to stand. She buried her face affectionately in her father's chest, saying she had an interesting idea. Serena began to explain that if she could master the other 2 arts, but her father interrupted her and her expression changed. The girl looked up and again her expression changed, her face now one of shock. Her father told her that the future of the Levilee family depended on her. She was left speechless, still staring at him as he told her never to forget that. Then she woke up, back in her bed at the training field. Sitting up in bed, she wondered if that had been a nightmare and swore she had been training just a second ago. Suddenly, someone asked if she was a Levilee, which startled her and caught her attention. The instructor was leaning against the wall, holding the ring with the family crest in his hand. He threw the metal stars at her and she barely dodged them. Serena looked toward the door, thinking her cover had been blown and that she had to escape. Then she wondered why she was in his office and not in a torture room, and what he was planning. The instructor casually tossed the ring in the air while asking what a descendant of such a great family was doing there. The girl grew angry while he thought that she was still letting herself be provoked, that in the end, she was still just a child. She picked up one of the metal stars that had stuck into the floor. Then she made a motion as if she were going to throw it at the instructor. But he asked whether she had no pride at all in that stone sword of hers, or if, in fact, she was just now gaining the courage to scrub off its rust. The sentence makes her stop the throw just before the iron star leaves her hand. They stare at each other for a while as the instructor thinks it's a good thing she fell for his little act. He says he assumes she knows about the 3 sword arts, and that the first is the stone sword of the Levilee family, and that the second is the shadow cut of Death's Shadow. The girl is left speechless when he says the third is this one, and the instructor makes his sword ignite in flames. She then realizes it's the technique of the battlefield flames, and the instructor says at least her eyes aren't rusty. The man says he's there for the same reason she is, and that's why he also has to keep his identity secret. The girl wonders why he would reveal his secret like that, while he thinks it's great that she believes they share the same goal. She then asks why he told her that, to which he replies that he can teach her everything he knows about the flames and the shadow cut, and she asks why. The instructor says it's because it's still incomplete, and he doesn't know what side effects it might have, but in truth, he just wants to buy time to get rid of her. She thinks the instructor is right, that incomplete techniques can greatly affect the user, and asks if he's saying he wants to test the techniques on her. He says yes, that she needs to be willing to risk her life, while thinking he's going to end hers by teaching those techniques. Getting closer to the girl and placing a hand on her shoulder, he says he imagines she wants to save her family's name by improving the inherited technique. Then he proposes that they both complete their sword techniques together, so they both get what they want. Serena asks if he's saying he'll secretly take her as his apprentice, to which he confirms yes. The girl wonders if she can trust him, but remembers she just saw the flame technique, and if she can master it and the shadow cut in the same place. Serena then says all right. The instructor celebrates inwardly, thinking the girl is done for, while on the outside he stays serious and says she made a good choice. The next day, a beautiful morning begins. We see a metal weight drop to the ground as the instructor says that a key quality for a swordsman is strong legs, and that they'll have to train using that. The girl asks if overtraining isn't bad for someone who's still growing, and the instructor thinks he hopes she really does go down. Then he extends his hand and tells her to take that solution 3 times a day and use that ointment to ease any side effects that may occur. She takes the jars and says okay. While she thinks that's how he trained himself, he thinks it's obviously fake medicine, and that it'd be even better if she caught an infection. 10 days later, the girl has her sword in hand and suddenly stops. A second later, she collapses unconscious to the ground. The instructor is watching from afar as others rush to help her. He smiles to himself, thinking she's like a zombie, that it's only a matter of time before she's finished. Another 10 days pass while he thinks that at this rate it shouldn't take much longer. Yet another 10 days pass while he thinks things are starting to spiral out of his control. He thinks if this keeps up, he'll be the one who ends up ruined. The instructor looks on with a nervous wrinkle and wonders what kind of monster that girl is. Everything he's done has only made her stronger. The girl asks if something is wrong, and he says no. But inside, he thinks it's all her fault and wonders why on earth she keeps getting stronger. Then, surprising her, he says he'll begin her real training the next day. She leaves the room wondering if he just gave her some kind of approval, while he thinks not even young men could endure 15 days and she lasted 30. The instructor drinks water while thinking of new ways to finish her off when he hears a sound behind him and asks if she forgot something. But when he turns around, he sees it's not the student. It's another instructor, who apologizes and says he wasn't who he expected. He says he wasn't expecting anyone, while the other says he already knows he's been spending a lot of time with number 7 lately. The instructor says she's only consulted him about training. The other one tells him not to say he's catching feelings for that student, but gets a face full of coffee spit by his friend. Cain snaps, asking if he's insane and where he heard that ridiculous, baseless rumor. Then the other instructor, wiping himself off, asks why he's being so emotional. It's not like him. He then turns around and says he's leaving, while Cain wonders why he even came there in the first place. As he passes the desk, the other instructor quickly grabs one of the papers lying on top. He starts reading the information on the sheet. While locking, he passes student number 23. Another day of training begins, and Cain is teaching Serena about the difference between the battlefield flames, the shadow cut, and the stone sword. He says that if the combination of techniques isn't just right and perfectly executed, it could ruin everything. As he makes a cut through the air, he says that's why she'll have to choose only the strongest points from each one. Then flames erupt in the air like the claws of a tiger. He shifts his grip on the sword and forms a semicircle around himself, and the flames change their attack pattern. The girl barely has time to shut her eyes as the flames pass her and hit the tree behind. As he says that was the red fire technique, in his mind he's complaining about the pain in his wrist from the sudden spin. He explains it's a combination of the shadow cut and the battlefield flame, a deadly strike with high speed and power. The girl thinks she could feel the immense power of the technique just from that demonstration, while he believes he's convinced her. Cain says that if she combines the stone sword technique with the one he created, she'll end up with something lethal that can cut through anything in the blink of an eye. He adds that she also needs to be ready to go down with it, while she asks if a swordsman would really lie about all of that. Serena analyzes the instructor and concludes that it doesn't seem like he's lying. The man thinks to himself that he's a fraud, not a swordsman. The girl then says she'll master the technique, that she has more than enough reason to do so. He then stares at her for a few silent seconds. The man says that if she wishes to go beyond, he won't stop her, and sets a time with her for the next day in the same place, thinking the training will finish her off. The camera pulls back as he thinks with a sinister grin that it's only a matter of time before she meets her maker. Time skips forward to 1 year later with someone asking if training ends today and what that means. We then see that the girl didn't go down like he planned and only got stronger. He says a girl can't become an excellent swordswoman just by focusing on sword training alone, and she asks what else she needs beyond that. The trainer gets irritated and says that if she's going to complain, she might as well leave. He stays silent as she stands by his side, still staring at him, and he wonders what she's still doing there. Then she says she was being foolish and that she wants to learn things beyond just sword techniques. Cain lowers his newspaper and says fine. From that day on, the instructor taught her about many other subjects over 10 days. She says she learned philosophy, sciences, history, and even magic. She also thinks the instructor knows a lot about many things, almost like he's a scientist himself. Serena covers in with a coat while wondering who he really is and where he came from. Then, leaving him asleep at his desk, she walks out of the room, opening the door. As she exits, someone stops her in the hallway and says they want to talk to her. Serena turns to see who spoke to her. Then the person asks if there's a problem while we see the instructor with a grim expression. He says the instructor from Training Center 4 mentioned she's been seen very often with the instructor from Center 5. The girl says it's because she belongs to the 5th Training Center. The man tells her not to play dumb, that she knows exactly what he's talking about. He gets closer to her and says he's known who she was from the beginning and demands that she reveal the secrets of her sword art. The girl says she can't do that. Then she says that if he leaves now, she won't have to use her sword, while the man replies that even if she's a Levilee, she can't threaten an instructor. He then says they'll see if she keeps that attitude in the torture chambers. The man draws his sword and tries to strike the girl, but she blocks the attack with ease. Suddenly, another slash is made and we see our girl staring down the instructor. Then a large wound opens across the instructor's body. Serena is shocked by the strength of her own blow. Our heroine stands still, watching the instructor's body fall, thinking she only wanted to scare him. As we see his lifeless body on the floor, she thinks he was an intelligence specialist, but she never imagined he'd be so weak. She then realizes that just the fact the instructor from the 3rd Training Center came at her without hesitation means everyone must already know. Looking down the corridor, she thinks she has to escape now. Our heroine decides to jump out one of the nearby windows. She starts running through the forest, thinking she needs to flee before they all come after her. Suddenly, we see 3 people surround her. But our girl, who's no fool, had also noticed she was being followed. She quickly draws her sword from the sheath. Meanwhile, Cain starts waking up, asking what all the noise is about. Someone bursts through his office door, startling him and calling out his name. He stands up and asks the student who opened the door what the commotion is. Number 23 says that number 7 just sent the instructor from the 3rd Training Center to meet God personally and flood. Cain is shocked and stunned by the news. As he heads to the scene, she explains that it happened while the instructor was conducting an investigation on the girl, thinking she was a spy. Then our instructor thinks, since when did they suspect her? And if they suspected her, then they're definitely suspicious of him too. He turns his back and asks which way she went, and number 23 says she went into the forest to the west. When he asks where the other instructors are, she says the 1st and 2nd already went after her, and the 4th probably just found out. Cain wonders why the instructors from the 1st and 2nd centers went after the girl. He thinks the fact that he and number 4 were the last to know means they're suspecting him too, and decides he has to use this time to escape as well. Our instructor starts grabbing his things while asking where the students are and if the higher-ups were informed. Then he instructs the girl to gather the students and bring them to the instructor of the 4th Training Center, informing her that he'll go after number 7. The girl begins to say that the 1st instructor told her to take him instead. With his usual cold eyes, he cuts her off, asking if he hadn't made himself clear enough. The girl gulps and says she understood. He pulls up his coat to cover half of his face as he walks. Sometime later, he jumps through a window to the outside and ends up diving into the forest as well. As he walks, he spots one of the instructors slumped against a tree, unconscious and up ahead, the other 2 lying in strange positions, defeated. He pauses for a moment, thinking the girl took them all down with a single blow, that she's like a monster now. Cain notices something to his left and starts running in that direction. He arrives at a spot where he sees even more bodies on the ground, all defeated. Suddenly, we hear Serena breathing heavily, asking who's there, and our instructor turns, locating her. Our girl is filthy and has a cold, intense look. The 2 stare at each other for a moment without saying a word. Then she says she knew he'd come after her, but thinks it would have been better if their paths had never crossed again. He replies of course she knew, while drawing his sword, even as his mind screams for him not to do this. Serena then says that in the end she was the hand that fed her. She quickly leaps forward and charges at Cain at terrifying speed with a serious expression. Our instructor, knowing the destructive potential she holds, also turns serious as she comes at him. Then we see the 2 face to face, and we see our instructor with a sword driven through his shoulder, and Serena with a look of surprise. The girl looks back and sees the 2nd instructor behind her, with Cain's sword through his heart. The defeated man begins to fall, dropping his knife as he heads toward the ground. A second later, he collapses heavily onto her back. While this is happening, she wonders how on earth the 2nd instructor got behind her without her noticing. The girl looks at Cain and asks why he used his sword against the instructor and not against her. He says she lets her emotions take over so much that she didn't even notice the threat right behind her. With his injured arm, he gives a faint smile and says she's still stupid and clumsy, but his mind is screaming in pain from his shoulder. The girl stands still not fully understanding what just happened. Our instructor then turns and grabs his bag. From inside it, he pulls out a pouch with some supplies. He hands the pouch to her and says he brought a few things that can help her escape, that she should follow the map inside. The girl reaches out to take the pouch while saying that she tried to finish him off, and even so, he cuts her off, telling her not to judge the situation too quickly. Then the man says she's just bait, while thinking that now that he knows the other instructors want to kill him, he'll really use her as bait. The girl listens thoughtfully and asks if she really is just bait. Then she asks if being bait is all she has to do to repay him for everything he's done for her. While wrapping a bandage around his wound, he thinks to himself, what's wrong with Serena? Then he wonders if she thinks the map isn't enough, and that if she doesn't want to be bait, he's screwed. Cain then closes his hand and pats her shoulder. He opens his hand with some gold coins and says he doesn't expect anything more than that, while thinking she should just take the money and get going already. The girl has a sad look, staring at the ground, deep in thought. She takes the gold, wondering why he's giving her that, if it's so she can survive a little longer and serve as bait, while he never expected her to accept it. Then he walks past her to retrieve his sword from the fallen enemy and tells her to go now. They're out of time. The girl, putting away her sword, says she hopes Cain gets a real apprentice someday. He says nothing, but thinks there's no one dumb enough to want to learn that insane sword technique except her. The girl then quickly turns, wondering if she really just heard him chuckle or not. Again, she looks down, lost in thought. Sometime later, we see a mountain with forest below and above. A group of people stands atop the mountain near the edge. On one side, we see the instructor from the first training center saying to the others that he chose the apprentice, and he replies that he already expected things would end like this. She then asks him if he really did that, and he says he didn't expect her to let him go, just like he didn't expect her to hand over her techniques. Then, drawing her sword, she says there's no other way to settle things. With a condescending smile, she says she'll at least let him go down as a swordsman. He replies that it's very considerate of her, while thinking his shoulder hurts like hell. The woman notices he's injured and asks if it was the second instructor, and he answers that it's none of her business. Still with that little smile, she says it's a shame to defeat him while he's not at his best. Cain responds that it really is a shame, but he doesn't plan on making it easy for her. She says he really should make it easy, then charges at him. Getting close, she spins her sword in a horizontal slash. Cain's sword ignites in flames and he blocks her attack. Smiling, he compliments her shadowy move. The woman, also smiling, praises his battlefield flame. Then their swords slide against each other, and they step back to gain some distance, blades still touching. Each of the fatal strikes from the three sword arts has its own traits. The stone sword, which can pierce through any defense. The shadow cut, which guarantees victory. And the battlefield flame, which counters right after blocking. All of these traits are interconnected. Among them, the battlefield flames can be weak against the stone sword, which breaks through defenses. But it's a natural counter to the shadow cut, which leaves the user vulnerable to counterattacks. So in theory, our villain should win. But the difference in sword arts is completely overshadowed by strength and sword precision. And that's how we see our Cain taking cuts across multiple parts of his body, even when he should have the advantage. The woman then grabs him by the neck. He's at the edge of the cliff as she says it's a shame his shoulder was injured, and he replies he doesn't need her sympathy. Then he says she won't be able to defeat his apprentice so easily, but the woman says she'll send her to meet him in the afterlife soon enough. The woman then pushes our instructor. He falls from a massive height into the void and darkness. As our villain falls down the cliff, the woman stands at the edge looking down. She tells her group that now it's time to go after the traitor, number 7. The girl looks up at the sky and thinks the instructor probably doesn't need her as bait anymore. Suddenly, she notices something to her left, and we see someone leaping from the forest to attack her. That someone takes his slash from our girl straight across the abdomen, then collapses to the ground as she watches calmly. The girl tears off a piece of the attacker's clothing. She uses the cloth she ripped to clean her blade, thinking that with this one, that's 30 attackers now. The girl thinks that thanks to the survival training, she's been able to stay alive so far, and those skills were earned in extreme danger. She wonders what kind of life her instructor lived, but then murmurs to herself that there's no way to ask anymore. Then someone yells for number 7 to stop right where she is, pulling her from her thoughts. Suddenly, we see she's surrounded by at least 10 people, all with serious faces, closely watching her every move. She realizes it's not just the first instructor who's there. The elite Sword Shadows unit has come too. The woman tells her to surrender, that they'll spare her life if she does. Serena thinks that woman doesn't seem like the type to lie. With sword in hand, our little heroine says she won't spend the rest of her life rotting in a cage. The woman shakes her head. The people around her begin drawing their swords and preparing to fight. She says she didn't really expect the student of the 5th instructor to give up so easily, while Serena says she's not a battlefield flame apprentice. The woman says she wants to make something clear, that Serena is his final apprentice since the dead can no longer teach anyone. Serena understands exactly what she means by that and is shocked. The woman goes on, saying he joined them because he wanted their technique just as they wanted his, But once the technique is passed on, the person becomes expendable. That's why he sacrificed himself, because he had already passed his technique on to Serena. She then says that if it hadn't been for her, maybe he would have had enough time. The woman adds that he went out fairly as a swordsman in a direct duel against her. Serena says there's no way he could have lost to her, and the woman replies that maybe that's true if he hadn't had an injured shoulder. Our girl then starts to feel an overwhelming sense of guilt, since she was the one who injured his shoulder. After a few moments, the woman says it's too late now. He's already gone and Serena should get ready. But she's interrupted as Serena slashes her sword across the woman's neck. The others who were with the woman are left stunned, but not for long as Serena strikes them down too. The girl goes on, easily defeating everyone who had surrounded her. She thinks it's always like this. She always ends up losing everything important to her while chasing the sword arts. That this is her fate, having been born a swordswoman. Then we see our girl standing covered in dirt after defeating all the people surrounding her. Like a true first-class swordswoman, she would continue cutting down everyone in her path. We hear cries for help and voices shouting to retreat. The screams grow more distant as the camera pulls back, showing the vast forest. Then we see a hand start to tremble. Suddenly, we see someone rising from the ground, wrapped in a white cloth. We see our favorite villain getting up from beneath the white cloth, saying that was a close one. He kneels down and coughs from a sudden pain. Then he says his head is spinning and he needs a coagulant. Opening his bag, he thinks to himself that everything happened according to plan. We then return to the scene of him falling off the cliff, smiling. However, as he falls, he pulls a rope hidden inside his clothes, and we see a makeshift parachute opening above his head. He manages to make his descent much smoother than it would have been otherwise. Then he ties a bandage around his stomach and says that, in any case, he's still alive. The only thing that matters to him is staying alive. Nothing else matters. He slings his backpack over his shoulders after bandaging all his wounds. While thinking that people can laugh all they want, he also feels down, since the job was good and now it's going to be hard to find another. Cain takes a deep breath and thinks that as a low-tier villain, at least he's still alive. Then he keeps walking through the forest. Elsewhere, on top of the hill, we see someone. It's our girl dragging one of her feet, reaching the top of the hill, all dirty and with a serious look. She notices a sword near the edge. She limps over and picks up the sword in her hands. She raises the sword toward the bright morning sun. The girl says she will survive no matter what and will repay her debt. She screams, swearing by her sword, that until the day she dies, she will keep her promise. The promise of the future heroine and divine sword echoed across the world, something only the two of them knew, that it was a farewell to her first and last mentor. Sometime later, we see Serena eating a snake and saying it really has a unique flavor. A man asks if someone from the Empire eats crawling snakes. She then says she's used to exotic foods and that it's fine. She thinks there's nothing better than poisonous snakes to build resistance to toxins, though if she fails, she's a goner. The boy then asks why someone from the Empire is there if she's just out on a walk or something. She says she came to the southeastern forest to train. Looking outside, she sees several small huts built in the middle of the forest. Someone says they got the guide she asked for, and our girl thanks them. She says she thought it would take longer since the forest depths are quite dangerous. The man laughs and says folks around there aren't afraid of the forest. Then he looks at her and around them, stepping closer as if to share a secret. He whispers to her that what they're really afraid of is Shahada. The girl asks if Shahada is a demon. He says that, in the Empire's language, it would be a ghost. Actually, it's a human-eating ghost. Then he starts unbuttoning his shirt and says he's encountered Shahada before. We then see a scar running from his neck to his waist, and he says that's the proof. Serena notices that the scar was made by a sword. From the location, it was a strike aimed directly at his vital points, requiring a certain level of skill to land so precisely. It would have to be someone as skilled as her first instructor, who was the best swordswoman in the Deadly Shadows. She swallows hard and wonders if Shahada is still in that forest. She grips the hilt of her sword tightly as the boy buttons his shirt again. He notices and says that Shahada is an immortal ghost, warning her to be careful in the forest. Serena becomes serious and thanks him for the advice. Night falls and we see the huts in the darkness of the forest. Serena is lying on her makeshift bed with her sword by her side. She thinks that an immortal heart-eating ghost is absurd. Reaching for her sword, she thinks that if such a ghost really exists. Then her fingertips touch the sword as she thinks about what it would be like to meet those who are gone. She holds her sword and hugs it, thinking of her father and her instructor. Then, wearing what seems like a dream as someone calls out to Iberius. The earrings of a person with long white hair glow as she channels magic into her hands. Then she shouts ice storm and a real storm forms around another person. This person was blonde with short hair and tried to shield her face from the ice storm. We see that this person is Serena, who calls out to Seville, saying she used to be a heroine praised by everyone and asks why she's doing this. She then says she's tired of playing the heroine. Pointing her finger at our girl, she says that Serena will eventually come to the same conclusion, that the life of a hero is empty and that in the end there's nothing but destruction waiting. Serena then asks what she is. Again, the earrings glow as the other woman says that if she wants to see, she'll show her who she really is. She tells Iberius to pierce the girl with infinite ice arrows. Suddenly something happens and she opens her eyes. The girl wakes from her nightmare with a snake beside her on the bed. While crushing the poor snake, she says she's been having every kind of nightmare lately. She tosses the snake out the window as she wonders if it's really been 3 years since ending the deadly shadow. A lot has happened while she wandered aimlessly across the continent. She's been able to face anything with determination, all for the sake of restoring and protecting her family's reputation. She was the one who defeated the master of the Mountain of Darkness. His name was Kurta, the strongest demon. Even so, she still doesn't understand why Levilee was so furious that day. As she wondered what could turn a heroine into the leader of a bandit group, someone knocked at her door. A boy walks in saying he heard there's a visitor from the Empire and asks if she's the one looking for a guide. Serena says yes, and the little boy says it's a pleasure to meet her. He introduces himself as Regia, a veteran guide from that village. She then asks if it's really him while thinking the kid is still just a child. The boy says she's nervous because he looks too young, and she confirms, saying it's a dangerous task and she's worried. He says that if she's nervous, she can wait for Harba to finish his business if she wants, but since he was paid in advance, he doesn't really care. Meanwhile, Serena thinks she can't keep postponing things, so she says it's fine, and that it's a pleasure to meet the boy. A letter is shown saying the target is in the last village of the southeastern forest and instructs them to complete the mission. Meanwhile, Cain is crouching, thinking he knew the evil organization would be capable of sending someone even to the ends of the continent for their ambition. Cain reads the letter as a little boy and his mother walk by. He wears a serious expression while thinking this really isn't anything new. Putting the note back in his bag, he continues wondering if they truly sent him all the way to the end of the continent. Our villain then stops in a village very similar to the one Serena is in. Standing still, he thinks that first he needs a guide, but they're really expensive in that region. Then a boy with a painted face walks past our villain. The boy asks if he's looking for a guide to take him to the last village. He points to a clearing and says he'll find one over there. Saying he's already busy, the boy mentions he also knows the way and that it's a shame the man arrived late because he's the only veteran around. Cain asks if that's really the case while thinking he didn't ask any of that. As he walks away, the boy says there are only 2 guides who know how to reach the last village, so he better hurry. Stopping to think, our villain says he doesn't want to pay too much and that there are only 2. Suddenly, something falls on his head. He looks up, thinking something heavy just dropped on him. Then we see a white venomous snake with its mouth open staring at him. Cain panics as the snake bites his finger. The villain throws it far away. He opens his bag and grabs a vial of antidote. Quickly, he swallows 4 capsules. The next second, he's on the ground crawling with the snake. As he trembles and foams at the mouth, he wonders why on earth a white venomous snake would fall on his head out of nowhere. Then from the ground, he manages to see a window in the building next to where he is. He then notices a glimpse of blonde hair. Still trembling, he thinks those bastards attacked him on purpose, but they'll easily deny it since that place is full of venomous snakes. Our villain starts getting up, saying they're a bunch of sneaky little devils. He thinks he'll retreat for now, but this won't be forgotten. Suddenly, a man stands in front of him and greets him. Then the man asks if he's feeling okay, if he got sick, and if he's hungry. Suddenly, he pulls out a white snake skewer and asks if he wants one. Our villain is horrified, staring at that skewer. The boy says he should try it and that he'll give him one for free. The man grabs the skewer and presses it against his face while glaring at the boy with hatred. A sword quickly flashes through the scene. We see the snake's skewer in front of the boy's face. Then we see the snake being sliced apart while the skewer remains intact. The sword stops right at the boy's neck as he asks what our villain is doing. He asks why exactly the boy was offering him that. Desperate, the boy says that thing is one of their local specialties and visitors from the Empire usually like it. Then he asks if they also like sleep flower tea. Our villain says he gives poisonous snakes to visitors and sells them the antidote that he won't be fooled. He then says they trick visitors, take all their money, or leave them to die in the forest. Is that how they welcome everyone in the forest? He should do the same thing, Imperial style, while the boy screams in fear. Then the boy kneels down and clutches our villain's foot, begging for forgiveness. But our villain says if he wants to apologize, he has to pay the price. Right after that, he remembers the message he saw earlier. He asks if the boy knows the guide who can take him to the last village. Then smiling, the boy says it's him. Looking down at the boy with a cold and shadowed gaze, our villain says the boy will be his guide then. The boy, a bit awkward and clearly terrified, says yes, of course I'll be the guide. He immediately regrets it and says he's a novice, that the villain won't like it, but the villain places a hand on his head and says the boy who claimed to be a veteran is already busy. So he says if only 2 guides know the way and that one's already taken, then this boy must be the second. The boy is mortified as villagers walk by, watching the scene in fear. Seeing the boy about to back out, our villain says he's free to choose punishment if he wants, and that's enough to convince him to be the guide. Cain puts his sword away and tells the guide to get ready, thinking he managed to save a good bit of money. With a smile on his face, our villain thinks that even in a situation like this, he came up with the idea to use the kid as his guide. Sometime later, he asks the boy if they're in a swamp, and the boy says it looks like they are. The villain says, "You're the guide and don't know this is a swamp," and the boy yells that that's exactly why he said he was a novice. Cain is clearly annoyed and pulls out a long vine. He swings it and throws it at a nearby tree, making the rope catch easily. The boy asks if he's a mage or if that's a magic rope, and our villain, irritated, says that if he keeps talking nonsense, he'll be left behind. The boy runs up and clings to Cain, begging him not to leave him alone. Our villain thought things might go smoother next time, but clearly he was wrong when the boy brought a beehive straight to him, or when he got stung and nearly died if it hadn't been for the villain's antidote pills, or when it started pouring and he didn't see it coming, or when he lost his backpack with food and everything else and then kept complaining he was starving. Our villain shared tree bark and dried meat with him. The boy was clearly very happy to have received food. As he ate, our villain watched him, and he completely regretted thinking that Kid would get better along the way and considers that maybe it's better to leave him right there. We see a forest and the characteristic sounds of birds and animals. The boy says they're in a marshy area, and if you fall in, it's over. He tells the girl to step exactly where he's stepping while looking back, and Serena is stuck, walking in the same place. Confused, he asks how on earth she's still walking when she should be sinking right there. Serena says it's easy, you just have to walk really fast. The next moment, she runs straight into a beehive. The boy points and tells her to be careful. The bees start swarming out of their hive, furious. But of course, Serena slices them all to pieces with her sword while the boy watches in awe. He asks how she did that, and the girl says you just have to cut really fast. Still shaken, the boy says it's a relief she didn't get stung. After that, she managed to handle a venomous snake, a jaguar, and even carnivorous plants. The boy then asks if she's sure she's human, and she replies of course she is. Does he have a problem with that? The boy says no. He keeps questioning, and she says the only different thing is that she received special training. Things like running on water and eating poisonous insects to build up resistance to toxins. She also had to eliminate the assassins who were after her, and even so, the southeastern forests were terrible. The girl then says that in any case, they need to keep moving. Sometime later, he says that's the second village. She says that's an extremely simple name for a village. The boy explains that those villages keep getting destroyed by the forest, and it's tiring having to rename them every time, so now they just use numbers. As she says she understands and receives stares from the other villagers, the boy says they should find something to eat. Serena picked up a knife and asked Rajia if people there didn't like citizens from the Empire. He replies that they don't and asks why. She says she started noticing everyone seems to be avoiding her. The boy, while eating a coxina, says he hadn't noticed that, and maybe it's just because everyone's busy. There's a hunting competition where all the villages participate. She looks outside and sees people working, then asks if all 5 villages take part, and if so, that must be a huge event. So those people out there really are all working and very busy. Serena notices that and tells the boy. Pushing over a plate full of bones, he asks if she wants to try joining the tournament. It's open to everyone. She eats a fruit and says she'll skip this one, thinking that her goal is to train her swordsmanship and she has no time to waste hunting. She then thinks it's obvious what would happen if she competed against hunters. Meanwhile, someone is watching our heroine from afar. That someone is a woman with long dark hair, holding a spear, and she clearly doesn't look happy with Serena. Sometime later, the boy says that's the third village, but the entrance is blocked by several branches and giant trees in the way. The boy wonders if something happened and says it's strange. Suddenly, they hear a scream coming from nearby. Serena quickly draws her sword and tells Regia to wait there. She leaps forward before the boy can even respond. With her sword already igniting in flames, she charges forward and raises it above her head, ready to strike. Striking with precision and power, she breaks through the tree branches blocking her path. The entrance to the village is now open, with some branches still burning from her strikes scattered nearby. She runs into the village and we see several bodies piled up. The girl is completely shocked by what she sees. She walks nearby and sees bodies lying all over. Serena covers her mouth in horror at the sight while a man stands atop one of the piles of corpses. He notices her, and she notices him. The man holds a heart in one hand and a mash sheet in the other. Then he quickly eats the heart in his hand while Serena looks on, disgusted. Without mercy or a word, she leaps at the man with her sword. He swiftly dodges her attack. The man jumps back in a final leap, landing crouched. She runs in to close the distance while he licks his mash sheet, staring at her coldly. Then she recognizes that blade as a kukri and notes that his skills are strange. She remembers the boy telling her about Shahata, a human-eating ghost. She also remembers him showing her the massive scar across his chest. Ripping her sword tighter, she thinks that this must be the cannibal ghost. She introduces herself to the ghost, saying her name is Serena R. Levilee, and declares that she is the one who will punish him for his sins. The ghost then stands still. Next, he shows a wicked smile. He suddenly lunges at her with his kukri. The girl barely manages to block the fast strike aimed at her face. She uses her strength to deflect the blow while the man keeps smiling. As she ducks, she tries a horizontal slash, but the man is quick and takes a step back, dodging it. He then crouches and strikes her above the foot. Serena feels the hit and falls with her sword, but the man once again is faster and flips backward. Standing and facing her, he smiles and toys with his light blade. Our heroine thinks he's strong and she already knew his skills weren't ordinary when he blocked her first deadly technique. She pulls her sword from the ground. As she thinks that fighting him will be difficult, she begins to ask him something. Then, pointing her sword at him, she asks if he doesn't fear death. Serena notices he's willing to risk being struck when attacking, a reckless tactic that throws your body away without caring if you die, as long as your enemy falls too. She turns her blade in her hands and says, fine, if that's what he wants. Her sword ignites in flames as she says she'll end him. The ghost then begins to laugh loudly and once again charges at our girl. She uses Form 3 and unleashes the Red Lotus explosion attack. The man manages to block one of the flames coming toward him. The next flame, however, carries our warrior's sword along with it. Then startled, the ghost's sword shatters in two. He holds his weapon, watching as the other half breaks off and flies away. Our girl, with a serious look, spins her flaming sword once more. The ghost manages to evade the fiery slash by arching his body backward. However, our heroine follows with a furious vertical strike. The blow lands squarely on the man's chest, leaving no room for escape. With the force of the attack, the ghost's eyes widen as he realizes the damage he's taken. From a distance, we see his body now missing one arm. Instead of crying, the man laughs as if completely possessed. And then, unexpectedly, he leaps away trying to flee. Serena tells him to stop right there and starts running after him. She sees him stop in front of a pile of corpses he had made. As she gets closer, she asks what the hell he's doing. The man plunges his hand into one of the bodies in the pile, piercing it. He smiles, looking at the girl with a heart in his hand. The girl says what he's doing is an atrocity and asks if he plans to insult the dead even more. Without hesitation, he starts eating the freshly torn out heart. He quickly swallows every piece, smiling. Where the ghost's lost arm had been, the wound closes instantly. The girl stands there, watching closely. As his arm regenerates and grows back, she wonders whether it's magic, spirit power, or something else. Still observing, she thinks that shouldn't be possible. He's not using the power of God or the devil. The man stands there, his wicked smile fixed on her, staring. Then she thinks that clearly this thing is not human. She takes a small limping step because of her foot injury. Then she asks him what he is. The man laughs and repeats her question, saying, "What am I?" Then the two stare at each other when suddenly someone calls out to the girl, breaking the tension between them. Seeing the moment, the newcomer says maybe he interrupted something and wonders if he should just leave. In a flash, a man jumps toward the boy and grabs him, leaving the girl behind. She then yells his name as she witnesses the scene. Confused, the boy asks her what's going on. Then the man points east and says something. He quickly begins leaping from tree to tree, moving fast in the direction he pointed. Our girl tells him to stop and tries to follow, but her injured foot keeps her from running. She then says to herself that he took a child as a hostage, someone who had nothing to do with their fight. She also notices he took her food and bag and then wonders, did he say last village? Our girl then sheathes her sword and thinks she has no other choice but to move forward. Cain and the boy finally arrive at the same village where Serena had been and notice that the place is a complete mess. He asks if there are bandits in the southeastern forest, and the boy says there are no bandits. The instructor catches the tone in the boy's voice and says that means there are other things lurking around. Suddenly, our instructor sees several bodies on the ground, which frightens the boy behind him. He then steps closer, thinking that a skilled villain must be used to crime scenes. Looking at how the bodies are arranged, he says it seems like the work of a first-class swordsman. Turning over the body in front of him, he wonders why there are bite marks on them. He has no doubt that those are human bite marks. He also notices signs of a fight with another person in the area. The opponent also seems to be a first-class swordsman, which means there's a human-eating monster and human of equal power in that region. He says out loud that something smells bad, and the boy says yes because of the bodies. Then a female voice calls out, asking if he's from the organization, catching both their attention. They look back and see a woman stepping out of the smoke. She introduces herself as Asura and says she came to that last village to meet him. Sometime later, the woman is walking in front while the two of them follow behind. He thinks he feels 1,000 times more comfortable now with a woman guiding them than with the kid. They receive warm welcomes in every village they pass through. Looking at the woman ahead of him, he thinks he can't shake this strange feeling. He can sense in the air. The scent is everywhere. Suddenly, he grabs the boy, making him tense up. The boy whispers to him, saying the man doesn't need a guide anymore and should let him go. The man replies no, since he promised to take him to the last village, and wonders where the kid thinks he's going at a time like this. He might even end up needing to use him as bait. Out of nowhere, the woman smiles and turns around, saying they've arrived. She keeps walking while the man forces the boy to continue walking behind her. The woman then stops in front of a mansion with lit torches, kneels at the door, and tells Durha that the visitors are here. Then, opening a curtain, she tells them to go inside. Someone inside says for him to enter and calls him the messenger of the organization. He then takes his seat and says it's a pleasure to meet the governor of the forest, while the boy behind him wonders what the hell is going on. The bald man says he's not a governor, he just has a bit of influence in the area, that's all. The bald man asks what our villain wants there, while Cain thinks the guy already knows why he's there. He says the organization wants to recruit him, and the boy yells, asking what that even means, thinking it's not right to send a rookie like him to recruit others. The bald man asks if they want his organization to work for them, and the instructor says if they don't cooperate, they won't survive. While taking another puff from his coca, he asks if Cain is aware. Our instructor asks, aware of what? The old man says there was a beast attack recently, and the instructor asks if that's not normal. The old man replies yes, but this beast was different. He says the beast's claws almost reached them. Cain realizes that even he is feeling threatened. Then he begins to think, anything that can threaten him must be one of the blessed heroes or that thing that attacked the previous village. The old man then says it's a strange coincidence that it happened at the exact time negotiations are taking place. Our instructor realizes that the man thinks someone from the evil organization is behind it. He asks what the old man wants while thinking that damn organization should have told him they were threatening the guy. Then the man makes an offer. Take care of the beast for them. Our villain asks if that's a condition for them to accept, and the old man says it could be considered that. Cain begins to stand, telling him to consider it done, while thinking they're basically asking him to throw a teammate to the wolves. The old man then says that before he goes, there's something else he needs to know. He says he has poor vision and might end up mistaking him for the beast while they're out there in the forest. Then he says his sword doesn't do a great job telling opponents apart. The old man says he doesn't mind. A normal hunt is boring anyway, and tells him to enjoy the banquet tonight because things will be different tomorrow. Sometime later, we see our villain running with the boy behind him, thinking he's not going to waste time playing around while the old man gets ready to hunt him. The boy says he made things more complicated, but our villain tells him to shut up and asks if he thinks this is what he wanted. A second later, they hear the sound of chains and see a scythe flying toward them. The scythe hits the ground between them, startling them both. As it's pulled back, the boy guide screams. Our villain turns around and sees a woman launching a second attack at them. She lands with her weapon poised in front of her while Cain backs away, alarmed. Out of nowhere, a spear comes flying toward our villain's face. He stands in front of the terrified guide boy. Right after, Asha appears behind the other woman, smiling, saying he's more impatient than he looks. As she licks her blade, the girl says she thought they'd stay for the banquet. Our villain replies that he doesn't like wasting time. The spear-wielding woman once again points her weapon at him. Then she says she knew the boy looked familiar. She says she saw him in the soul of the demon. Our villain thinks great, now I'm screwed, while the boy hides behind him, terrified. Quickly, he draws his sword, thinking he has no choice but to fight. It's two opponents against our villain. The two women decide to attack him at the same time. With a clever sword movement, he manages to block both attacks at once. Then he jumps and spins, throwing steel stars at them. The spear-wielding woman spins her weapon rapidly to form a shield, blocking the stars. Meanwhile, the other girl deflects the attack using the metal part of her scythe. During all this, the guide boy is crouched, trembling with fear, unsure what to do. One of the throwing stars lands near him, which terrifies him even more. Our villain then grabs a rope with one hand while holding the sword with the other. He tries to snare one of the girls, but she uses her spear to deflect the rope and tells him not to try cheap tricks like that on her. A second later, while she's distracted by the rope, he delivers a surprise vertical slash. The girl drops to the ground after being lightly cut. Behind him, the other girl's scythe comes flying fast toward his face. The metal part of the scythe passes by, leaving only the chain behind. That chain wraps around his neck. Meanwhile, the spear girl starts getting back on her feet. Then she throws her spear, grazing our villain's leg as he's being choked by the scythe's chain. The scythe girl tells him to pay some attention to her too as she tightens the chain and pulls him toward her. The scythe then lands on his shoulder, injuring him badly. She smiles and asks how it feels to be torn apart bit by bit. The other girl gets back on her feet while the scythe wielder keeps our villain restrained. Suddenly, he says, "Eat this," and stretches a package toward her, which gets caught on the scythe. The package explodes in a cloud of red smoke. She starts coughing and asks what that is. The other girl, the one with the spear, starts complaining about pain in her eyes. The guide boy starts drooling, wondering what that strange smell is. Our villain, kneeling on the ground with his sword in hand, removes the scythe's chain wrapped around him while complaining about how much those injuries hurt. Then he gets up and sees the guide boy in front of him. Holding the boy, he takes a few steps forward and starts calling out to Balshak. Raising his hand, he commands it to swallow them with its markings. The bracelet on his arm glows crimson. The guide boy remains dizzy, not understanding what's happening. And suddenly, the two of them vanish. The girls are left stunned and begin complaining when they can't find them. Then they find themselves alone in the forest. They still try to search the surroundings, but Asha declares they really vanished. The spear-wielding girl frowns and says she recognizes that magic, and she's certain he came from that place, vowing to take him down no matter what. Somewhere else, the two of them are completely exhausted. Our villain thinks he has no idea how that girl knew he was in the demon's soul and wonders if she was there too. He starts getting scared, thinking they're going to find him and chop him to bits no matter what, and we see the guide boy still being ignored. Suddenly, the boy yells, catching our villain's attention, who shouts back asking what he wants. He says it seemed like the girls knew him. Our villain says they must have mistaken him for someone else, but the boy asks what that talk about the demon's soul was all about. Our villain cuts him off, startling the boy. Then he asks if that's really important right now, or staying alive isn't a bit more important, as he thinks there's no reason the boy should know more about him. The guide finally seems to understand why our villain is called the Ice Stone. He then turns and says they better get moving, and the boy nervously stammers, asking where they're going. Cain says he can't let them have things their way. Elsewhere, we see a man yelling at people to keep moving and not let a single bird fly out there. Our villain and the guide approach what looks like the beginning of the hunt, with many people gathered in the background, armed. Using binoculars, he sees several people gathering in the city, hundreds from what he can tell. The guide is holding 2 branches to help disguise their position, and our villain whispers to him, asking if this is for real. Our villain wonders how hard it's going to be to escape when suddenly a beehive flies over his head toward the group at the bonfire. As he wonders what it is, the beehive lands right in the middle of them, causing a commotion. Black bees swarm out of the hive and begin attacking the men by the fire, and our villain and the guide use the opportunity to move. Meanwhile, the human-eating ghost is watching closely. Our villain and the guide flee as the others look at the wooden fence and blame the golden beetles, saying all they can do now is repair the damage. Elsewhere, the Scythe girl says it's so weird how sleepy she feels, while others behind her comment that something smells really good. The spear girl yells at her to wake up, saying some of them didn't sleep at all, and the other mutters that she probably shouldn't have made tea with red fruits. She grits her teeth in irritation. Then she shouts that she's going to show him the hell they had to go through as we see our villain and the guy running away behind her. In the daytime, someone yells out orders to capture the fugitives who are quietly hiding behind some trees, and Cain wonders if they ever get tired of chasing them. Raising a lit torch, Cain says he'll wear them out by force, and the guide thinks about how scary this guy really is. Black smoke rises into the sky in the middle of the forest as screams and fire alerts echo through the air. Cain walks calmly with the boy at his side. Meanwhile, Serena is running like mad from her pursuers who want to use her as a sacrifice. They shoot arrows that whistle past her, and as she runs for her life, she shouts back that she's not the enemy. She hides behind a tree and breathes a sigh of relief when she realizes she's shaken off the crowd. Our girl thinks it's not hard to escape, but from what she's seen, something is seriously wrong in that village, and Aisha's image, pointing her scythe, flashes through her mind. She keeps thinking about how each village has to sacrifice a specific number of people, and that there's no way to avoid it. She concludes it's like a 5-star farm for cannibal ghosts. Still hiding behind the tree, Serena tries to come up with a way to get out of there without sending anyone from the village to meet their maker. Deep in thought, she remembers she still has a lot to do, but she can't hesitate or stop even if she's completely worn out. An image of Cain appears in her mind, and she thinks that's exactly what he taught her. Determined, she now seems fully resolved. Suddenly, someone shouts that they found something, and Serena trembles with nerves and can barely hear them saying to bring water. She gets ready to draw her sword, wondering if she's been discovered. Glancing from the corner of her eye, she notices they're running and pointing toward a fire. Serena is left confused, wondering if they're more interested in putting out the fire and catching whoever started it than in catching her. Taking advantage of the chaos to escape, she says she doesn't know who started the fire, but that she intends to thank them when she can. Very quietly, she still hides around the village during her search. She even checks out some small cages, and that's when her attention is caught by a house much larger than the others. She then moves like an agile cat to the porch of the enormous tent, staying very silent. Serena opens the mat that covers the tent entrance and looks inside, surprised to find Rajya unconscious. He is lying face down on a long table surrounded by several extinguished candles. She calls out to him and hurries over, clearly worried. Taking cautious steps, she whispers to ask if the boy is okay. Sensing something strange nearby, Serena's eyes widen. Behind her, a long-haired man leaps toward her, holding a blade midair. In a quick motion, Serena turns and uses her sword to block the incoming attack. The two face each other, with the tattooed man grinning maliciously. Serena is left speechless at what she sees, but keeps her sword ready. Suddenly, other footsteps are heard, along with some low laughter. The man who attacked her is not alone. He's brought back up wielding sharp weapons, and Serena realizes she had assumed they'd all been lured out of the village. One of them throws a spear at her, but Serena dodges it with a Matrix-like move. Before she can recover, another enemy leaps through the air trying to land on her. Our protagonist steps aside, and the enemy crashes hard into the ground. Serena dodges again a few more times. Then she decides to counterattack, leaping toward her opponents. With her sword in hand, she doesn't hesitate at all. Like lightning, she dashes through 3 of the enemies, striking each one with precise, singular blows without even blinking. The long-haired man is the last one standing, ready to strike at the girl. Serena notices just in time and throws herself aside to evade. Gripping her sword in a special stance, she focuses. Finally, she invokes her fire technique, and her blade bursts into flames. Slicing through the air, she sends the flames toward the long-haired man standing before her. At the very last moment, he manages to dodge. The house they're in is almost completely destroyed by the power of the explosion that the man escapes. Landing, he surveys the destruction caused. Behind him, a very quick Serena rushes in. She picks up Rajya in her arms, still unconscious, and concludes in her thoughts that this whole situation has already gone far enough. Looking toward the exit of the destroyed house, she gets into position. Serena leaps swiftly toward the way out with Rajya. Mid-air, she thinks about how badly she needs to find a way out of there fast. But before she can finish the thought, someone swipes a blade dangerously close to her neck. She barely manages to dodge. She looks shocked and terrified at the sight of her attacker. None other than Rajya himself, with his curved sword, grinning boldly at her. He thinks about how close he was to landing a perfect hit on Serena and jumps out of the girl's arms. The move sends her crashing down hard onto the grass, landing on her backside. From the top of a straw roof, the little trickster looks at Serena and compliments her, saying she's an excellent swordswoman. He's on the roof of the burning hut and says he understands now why she's called the Sword of the Skies. Standing up, Serena stumbles as she asks if he was involved too. Grinning mockingly, Regia says he should reintroduce himself. The girl watches him, speechless but very focused. Serena looks at him amid the flames, and then he declares himself as Regia, the owner, leader, and absolute boss of that village. Some time has passed. Our protagonist wakes up from a good nap taken on the hard forest floor, rubbing her eyes and looking up at the dark sky. Serena sits up and starts tying up her hair, wondering if the nap lasted more than 10 minutes. As she grabs her sword, she recalls what had happened that week. Looking around the forest, she thinks about the chases from the cannibal ghosts and the village residents, but also that someone was helping her through it all. She remembers someone started a fire to distract the crowd and release insects to ruin the village's food and defenses. Our girl also remembers the best sleeping agent was used to knock out the cannibal ghosts for a while, and she even thinks about Aisha being attacked. Serena is very curious to know who's helping her, and grips her sword tightly. As she stands up, she thinks about how she doesn't know who or why they're helping her, but that she'd like to thank them if she can, even though she doubts she'll get the chance. Standing tall and brave, she looks toward the forest and says that the hide and seek has gone on long enough, and it seems they finally came to settle things. We see that she's talking to Regia, who appears from within the trees spinning his wavy dagger in one hand and says that actually he came to put an end to the game. Two henchmen jump out from the forest, a woman with a spear and the long-haired swordsman she met in the cabin, and Regia says he didn't expect the hunt to take this long. Pointing her sword at the trio, our protagonist asks Regia if he's not upset that she took out his companions. Reflective, the boy says that only happened because they were weaker than her. Anoni Serena asks if he means the weak deserve to perish, and he says that's just the way things are, right? What can you do? She grips her sword even tighter and says that's fine then. Getting into an attack stance, she says that if that's how it is, she'll give him a taste of the tyranny of the strong. Regia's henchwoman with the spear leaps towards Serena. As she spins her weapon in the air and prepares to strike, she tells our protagonist not to make her laugh. The spear's shaft hits hard against Serena's blade, which deflects the attack. Suddenly, a sharp blade is thrown toward the back of Serena's neck and nearly slices her face. Quickly, Serena defends herself with her sword by reflecting the enemy's attack and launches herself to the side. By fate's coincidence, the deflected blade goes flying through the air and lands directly in Regia's free hand. Now with a small sword in each hand, the little trickster runs toward the blonde girl. He tries to slash her, but she blocks the attack with her weapon. He delivers a flurry of quick attacks, all of which she barely manages to block with her sword. Just then, the long-haired enemy appears like a bolt of lightning and slams a knee into the protagonist's side. She feels a shocking pain and loses her breath. The force of the blow is so strong that Serena is thrown across the area and crashes directly into one of the nearby trees. The spear-wielding girl reappears and brings her weapon down toward the protagonist. Catching her off guard, the strike lands and hits one of Serena's legs. Grunting in pain, she quickly counterattacks with her sword. She slices through the wooden shaft of the enemy's spear, leaving the girl visibly shocked. She jumps back, afraid Serena might cut something else, and ends up kneeling on the ground. Without hesitation, Serena grabs the broken piece of the spear. Then she hurls it toward her enemy. Elsewhere, a wooden stake is driven into the ground by a hand. Cain sighs as he finishes setting up a tent for the night, and in the background, his travel companion is roasting some meat over a campfire. The boy near the fire drools from hunger as he watches the meat roasting, while Cain remains quietly in the background. The boy grabs a piece that's finished cooking, asks Cain if the loop flour induces sleep and the bunna fruit acts as a stimulant, then takes a big bite of the meat. Stoking the fire, Cain sits down and says that's exactly right, and that he shouldn't confuse the two. Chewing quickly, the hungry one asks where Cain is headed, and Cain replies that he's going to the 5th village. Shocked by the answer, the boy drops his meat and asks if Cain is going to meet with Durha again, to which Cain says he has no other choice. Thoughtfully, Cain adds that he wants the boy to be bait for the cannibal ghosts. Trembling, the frightened boy asks why it has to be him, and Cain responds that he's a villager. It would raise less suspicion. The boy shakes, and Cain adds that it's also been him solving every problem up to this point, which the swordsman thinks is a sad truth to admit. By morning, the guide goes to the 5th village alone and nervous, thinking Cain really did send him in by himself. He stops in front of the large main tent. Cautiously, he steps inside and asks if anyone's there. He's interrupted by Durha, who notices that the boy has arrived. He points out that no one has seen the boy in the past few days. The boy starts sweating and stammering, trying to come up with a response. Taking steps toward him, Durha says she understands it's because of Cain. Stopping in front of the young man, the old man says he bets the boy was dragged along by Cain just because he's a guide. Without thinking, the boy denies everything, saying Cain actually risked himself for him several times. Dryly laughing, the leader responds mockingly, asking if that's really true. tapping his wooden cane on the ground. He says that in that case, the boy also failed to hunt Cain, and the boy lets out a high-pitched scream of fear. Raising his hands slightly, Dura says he doesn't care about that. Placing a hand on the young guide's shoulder and squeezing it, Dura orders him to say where the travelers are. Terrified, the guide tries to find a way out of the situation while stammering some more, but is saved by the bell when someone shouts and enters the area. We don't see who arrived, but the startled guide and the unconcerned Dura look toward the entrance where someone asks if they were looking for him. Backlit, we realize Cain has entered the room. He stops and observes the two villagers with some discomfort. Suddenly, he jumps out of the hut like a startled cat, leaving the two of them completely confused. Wasting no time, Dura runs after Cain. The guide stays behind, but even trembling with nerves, he follows the two, begging them to wait. Dura and the guide run with precision, the leader taking the lead in the chase. They stop and the guide tries to catch his breath while the old man fixes his gaze ahead. In a threatening tone, he asks how long Cain plans on making a fool of him. Taking a few sips from a bottle, Cain stops to reply that there must be some kind of misunderstanding going on here. We see he's sitting on top of a wooden barrier, while the other two stand at the base of the large structure. Dura says he's not going to go easy anymore. No more babying in this game of tag, and pulls out his cane. Unfazed, Cain tosses the bottle aside and tells the mosquito airport to do whatever he wants. Looking down at the two below, Cain says he just needs to do one thing first and presses a red button he'd been hiding all along. Jumping quickly to a nearby rock, the barrier he was sitting on explodes. An absurd amount of water is released toward the two, and Dura is taken by surprise. Mockingly safe on top of the rock, Cain hints that maybe Dura won't even be able to come after him. The water floods the entire village, rushing past houses and trees. Amid the soaking chaos, the guide screams for help, and Dura doesn't even seem to hear. The bald man then looks toward one of the nearby houses. He jumps from the current up onto the roof of the house. Soaked, he turns to look over everything, still holding his cane. He questions if Cain has really chosen to challenge him, raising his cane high. Quickly, the swordsman jumps from the rock to a lower rooftop. Drawing his sword, he says the plan was to lure Dura out of the village so he could clear the place out. Cain reflects that maybe he should have just threatened to blow up the barrier and forced him to surrender, but oh well, too late now. The bald guy's wet and mad. Raising his cane, the village leader summons a green aura and calls forth his wind technique. Aiming at Cain, he releases a greenish whirlwind, commanding it to blow the enemy away. Cain lets out a small squeal as he narrowly avoids being hit by the wind blast and leaps onto a neighboring roof. From there, he looks at the damage Dura caused to the poor neighbor's house and thinks that if he gets hit by one of those, he's done for. Before Cain can react, Dura is already hopping rooftops like a game of hopscotch, closing the distance fast, and in his thoughts, Cain begs the old man to give him time to breathe. We then discover that the village leader's cane hides a blade because he pulls it out as soon as he gets close to Cain. Cain blocks the villain's attack with his own sword and the blades clash. Cain crouches defensively, while Dura stands firm and ready to strike again. Looking at the villain, Cain seems irritated when Dura begins to speak. Dura says that Karen told him he suspected Kale was inside the demon's soul. Somewhere else, someone stops and stares intently at something. We realize it's the spear-wielding girl who is fighting Serena, now completely motionless. Our protagonist lands another strike on the opponent. She watches as the villainess falls to her knees, no longer a threat. Fast, barefoot steps approach her. She can hear them. She turns quickly, but not fast enough. The long-haired enemy lands another knee strike on the girl, strike number 2. She flies toward another tree trunk and hits it with her back, losing her breath. Like a snake, Rajya quickly climbs up another tree and watches. From up high, he observes the fight below with Serena breathless and the long-haired one in front of her. Preparing his 2 blades, the villain gets ready. He throws both weapons towards Serena. She quickly realizes his plan and braces herself. Extremely angry, our protagonist grabs both blades at once with her free hand. She glares furiously at the village leader and shows him the knives. Using her fire technique, she ignites both weapons. The villain instantly realizes he's in deep trouble if he doesn't act fast. She then throws one of the weapons back at him, now blazing with fire. The flaming blade speeds toward its target. But sneaky as a rat, Rajya manages to dodge and jumps back down while the tree he was in catches fire. Before he can escape again, the second blade flies toward him. It seems like the end for the little trickster as the flames close in, and the long-haired man shouts Rajya's name. The henchman then promptly runs toward his boss. He positions himself in front of Serena's attack, shielding Rajya. He is engulfed in fierce flames and screams in agony. Rajya watches in shock as his ally falls to the ground while the scent of roasted flesh fills the clearing. Fuming with anger, he clenches his teeth. Then Rajya pulls the sword that was stuck in the tree trunk, the one Serena had thrown earlier. Before he can charge at the girl, he's caught off guard by a blur rushing in. A sword slices through the air. Suddenly, Rajya is struck several times by Serena before he has a chance to defend himself. Building momentum to turn, she lands a powerful kick squarely on the villain, knocking the wind out of him. He flies backward and crashes to the ground in a heap. Beneath the burning trees, Serena walks up to him and stands over the crusty-eyed boy, gripping her wounds. Pointing her sword at Rage's face, our protagonist says with full confidence that she has won the game. The boy laughs with disdain and through coughing, says it seems like she has. Lying on his back on the ground and staring up at Serena's sword, Rage says it's funny how they call them monsters when she's the real monster. Standing over the enemy, our protagonist says she's human and he denies it, saying the way she wields a sword isn't something humans do. Amid the flames, Serena keeps her blade pointed at Rage's neck and says she has one last question. She then asks what happened to the person who was helping her. With a smile on his face, Rage suggests that if she goes to the last village, she'll find the person there. Shifting her sword into a new position, Serena notices that Rage is still smiling. He says he knew she wouldn't spare him, and Serena, ready for the final strike, grips the hilt of her sword tightly. Determined, she looks at the boy and confirms his suspicion, saying she really won't spare him. Smiling once more, he says that even so, he had fun playing the game. Serena ends the game with a single strike. She hears the sound of the burning tree and returns to freely holding her sword, now no longer so clean. She looks one last time at Rage on the ground, motionless. Then she turns her back and leaves the clearing amid the flames, walking away while the three enemies are left behind. Elsewhere, on the straw roof of a house in a village, Durha and Cain continue to stare each other down. Focusing, the bald man once again summons his greenish wind energy while holding his sword. Preparing to launch his attack at Cain, the leader roars that Cain should be taken by the monsters he himself created. Cain blocks Durha's attack with his own sword. The two clash fiercely, with the wind-wielding bald man attacking and Cain defending skillfully. They're both very determined. Durha, his sword surrounded by magic, looks slightly concerned. But Cain isn't calm either, and as he defends against the strikes, he thinks about how annoying this is becoming. Hopping away, our villain curses angrily, and Durha doesn't understand a single thing. In a heroic yet clumsy move, Cain twists his ankle upon landing on the ground. He lets out a high-pitched cry of pain, jumping down from the rooftop to the village ground. Durha doesn't make the same mistake as Cain, who flinches at the sound of the bald man approaching. From that distance, Durha begins to summon his wind magic, seemingly for the last time. Cain looks slightly desperate as he glances back and sees the scene. Preparing to launch the sharp wind magic with full force, Durha calls for divine punishment to fall upon Cain. He then unleashes a massive attack toward our villain, who can't get out of the way in time. The wind is so strong it knocks the sword out of Cain's hand, and he uses his arms to shield his eyes. The magic hits him head-on with intense force. He's thrown far and ends up crashing through the wall of the house. In shock, our protagonist mentally complains about his aching back. Watching the damage he caused to the house, Durha stands still. From within the wrecked home, Cain looks at the enemy from a distance, trying to spot him inside. He tries to catch his breath after being used like a baseball. Reaching for the hilt of his sword, Cain asks Balshak to make him invisible. His dark aura begins to drift through the area. It passes by Durha, who senses something unusual nearby. But a few meters away from Durha, Cain's wounds cause him to become visible again, and he coughs. That makes Durha turn and promptly summon his wind attack again. He uses his sword to aim and launch the green hurricane once more at Cain. Cain, still unsteady from before, begins to think, if fire and wind mix, fire only gets stronger. With that, he activates his own technique to ignite his flames. Using his sword, he aims a column of fire toward Durha's wind. The two forces clash in a dazzling light show. The collision between the two creates a massive body of fire. It causes the entire surrounding area to catch fire. There are burning houses and trees in every direction. Durha briefly tries to shield himself from the flames, but then notices something else. Cain in midair, coming right at him, ready to strike with his flaming blade. Before Durha can defend himself, Cain's attack lands successfully, hitting the bald man square in the chest with fire. Falling to his knees before our villain, Durha appears to have fury burning in his eyes. Still catching his breath, the swordsman begins to say that Durha should surrender. But that's not what the bald man had in mind. He bolts like a rabbit through the fire, and Cain wonders how he even has the energy left and yells for him to stop. From afar in Durha's path, the guide watches the fight quietly, and Cain is stunned that he's still nearby. Cain wonders if Durha is heading toward him to grab his heart and regenerate, and decides he has to stop that. He tells Durha to stop immediately, but before he can continue, Durha orders the guide to get out of there, and the boy doesn't understand a thing. Above the guide, one of the burning tree branches breaks off and he's caught off guard. The branch falls fast toward the guide, and it looks like he's done for. A hand reaches through the air toward the boy, and a shout is heard just before the impact. Kneeling beside the burning branch, Durha is on his knees next to the young guide, having saved him just in time. Coughing weakly, Durha hears the boy asking if he's okay, and he says yes. Standing, Cain watches the two of them with his sword ready. The swordsman then walks toward the pair. He questions Durha, asking if it wouldn't be better for him to choose between being the guardian or the leader of the southern forest, and to do the job right. The old man doesn't fully understand the question and turns to Cain. Cain explains, saying he thought Durha would finish off anyone out of rage for the village being destroyed, but he didn't. Our villain points out that Dura chose to save the guide and that he clearly cares about the forest, leaving Dura speechless at the recognition from his enemy. Cain is surprised when the bald man repeats his own words about the rain of fear feeding on life, and Dura says that advice will stay with him. Our protagonist extends his hand to his opponent. Standing beside him, Cain suggests they put an end to the fight, and inside he's begging for it, because everything hurts and he desperately needs some pain relief. Taking our guy's hand, Dura stands up and says he has no choice. The guy clasps his hands in joy when the chief says the southern forest will be an ally. Acting super cool, Cain sheathes his sword and says that sounds good and all, but inside he's celebrating the fact he doesn't have to fight anymore. Dura walks past him and says he has to start fixing the damage caused and also asks Cain to inform Serena that he'll be waiting for her. Far from there, our girl stands face to face in the forest with someone we can't quite recognize. The light wind rustles Serena's hair as she looks at the figure ahead of her and says that it was all they're doing. Harba, the traitor, holds a stylish little pouch and looks at her in the middle of the night. He greets her with a good evening and the boldest face imaginable. The protagonist asks why he helped her, as the moonlight shines on them both. She had thought he was on the side of the cannibals, since he was the one who introduced her to Reja, but the merchant says he had to do something about the forest ghosts. Serena asks if he was planning to fight them from the beginning, and he replies by asking if she knows what the cannibal ghosts used to be. Leaning against a tree, she looks surprised but admits she doesn't know. Sitting on the ground, he gets straight to the point and says they were enslaved people. Harba explains that they were sold dirt cheap to people from the Empire, and that even before the era of the cannibal ghosts, that place was already a lawless mess. In the past, we see people fighting one another as he narrates that war was part of everyday life for the villagers back then. The trader says prisoners and orphans were sold as slaves, and we see Reja, Aisha, Durha, and others in chains. He says that some of them later returned to the forest and tried to change things using a then unknown power, and we see Reja eating a delicious chicken heart. Back in the present, the man explains that even that wasn't enough to unite the forest, they became addicted to the power they used to try to bring everyone together. The scared man confirms that the source of that power was indeed cannibalism, and that was the price of making a deal with the devil to gain an immortal heart. Harba then says someone had to stop them, and our protagonist concludes that's why he helped, and remembers how shamelessly he even pretended not to speak her language. He agrees but says it wasn't just that. It was also a repayment for Shahada. The blonde girl looks confused, saying she thought that was just another name for the cannibal ghosts. Laughing gracefully, our sunshine merchant says that obviously it wasn't. In another flashback, we see a man with a sword searching for the cannibals 6 years ago, and the merchant narrates that they fought this guy. We see the spear woman in battle and lazy Aisha yawning, while he explains that people joined the hunt but the man had fooled them all. The man was none other than Cain, wielding his fire sword, and Harba says he made the cannibals surrender. Back in the present, our cheerful merchant explains that this is how the legend of Shahada began. He was like a ghost who always came out on top. He happily says he just followed the footsteps described in the legend, and thanks to that story, he went from amateur to someone who learned a lot. She's shocked to realize that everything that affected the 5 villages was just a copy, but still insists on knowing what that has to do with him helping her. Curiously, the guy recognizes the sword the protagonist uses and asks if it might be the same one Shahada used. She remembers her general, and that the sword was a gift from him. And Harba concludes that yes, the partner of the man in the legend used to call him the 5th instructor, which leaves our girl totally stunned. We get flashes of past scenes like the first fight between Cain and Serena, and when he was with Harba, who was actually the guide with Cain 6 years ago. Scratching his neck, he says people must be after him since they're still mad about losing to Shahada, and that if she didn't have the sword, he wouldn't have helped her. Surprised, our protagonist thinks that if Cain hadn't helped the merchant, and if the merchant hadn't helped her, she'd probably be having tea with Queen Elizabeth II by now. Shaking her head to clear the thought, she says she came there on her own, and there was no avoiding a fight with them. Gripping her sword tightly, the girl thinks about how her master continues to make up for her weaknesses. Standing up, the former guide thanks her because now they have an opportunity, and she looks confused about what that might be. Smiling, he says it's the chance to bring peace back once again. Our girl smiles sincerely in return of the boy. Curious, the friendly young man asks what she plans to do from there on, and she replies that she's going to train even harder. He's stunned by the revelation and asks if she still needs more training, and she says she still has a lot to improve. As the day begins to brighten, she goes on saying there's something she would like to find if possible. The girl and the guide say their goodbyes as she thinks about how Harba made her realize just how much she still needs to grow. As she walks through the forest, Serena says that to make up for that, she'll continue refining her skills. Looking at the new rising sun, the girl thinks she's finally made her decision. Continuing her walk, our protagonist confirms that she'll keep searching for traces Cain left behind in the world. Smiling, she's certain that even after having died 3 years ago, the marks he left before they met are still out there, even if she can't see him anymore. Elsewhere, Cain is standing in the forest at night when someone approaches, saying they're impressed by what he accomplished. Even they hadn't managed that. From between the trees emerges a woman with short black hair, saying it was a great job, and the fire during the battle was impressive too. Irritated, he realizes she'd been watching the whole time, and thinks to himself that those scoundrels gave him this mission as soon as he joined the group. The mysterious woman smiles, confirming his suspicions, and rummages through one of her coat pockets. She pulls out a folded piece of paper and hands it to him, saying it's his next mission, which he thinks is absurd, considering he just finished the last one. Without hesitation, he takes the paper from her hand and opens it to read what's written. We don't see what it says, but he shoots her a stunned look. Smiling coldly, she asks if he's surprised by the orders. He says he didn't expect to receive a mission like this, and she replies that every good swordsman must pass on their skills to the next generation, and he's shocked. The woman says they'll be sent together, Cain as the 5th instructor, and her as the 1st, something he doesn't respond to, but thinks is obvious since she was the one keeping an eye on him. The sun begins to rise, and she notes that it's time to go. Gripping her sword's hilt, the woman calls our villain's attention to one more thing. She then draws her weapon with one hand and uses it to slice clean through the trunk of a massive tree next to them, startling the man. The wood cracks under the power of the fresh strike. With a sharp snap, the trunk breaks apart, revealing that behind the tree was the guide, Harba, standing still and listening to everything. The woman's strike passed through the tree and hit him in the chest, causing him to fall. Cain is shocked by the sight, realizing the guide hadn't left yet. Walking toward the fallen boy, the woman says that walls have ears, but that she can handle this particular ear. Our villain then rushes to grab the woman's hand, asking her to wait a moment. Menacingly, she gives him a chilling look as she asks what he wants, and our villain thinks to himself how terrifying she is. Hesitant, he explains that the peace they'd achieved could fall apart at any moment, and they needed someone keeping an eye on the forest rulers for them. Lying on the ground, hurting badly, Harba hears Cain say that besides all that, the boy was his guide. Shrugging and turning to leave, the woman leaves the guide in Cain's care. Giving one last look over her shoulder, the dark-haired woman says she'll be seeing him soon and calls him 5th instructor. He shivers but replies that they will, calling her first. Tired after taking a hit to the chest, the guide asks why our villain spared him. Sitting beside him and pulling the bag from his shoulder, Cain explains that he needs to keep being a guide and thinks that teaming up with other villains never ends well. Next, we see Harba bandaged up. Our villain took care of his wounds, and the guide says he'll never forget this debt. Standing up, the swordsman says he can repay it later. After all, the boy might make a decent informant. Turning his back to him, Cain walks away, thinking the training field wasn't so bad after all, since he wouldn't be risking his life and would get paid to babysit. Harba watches her savior walk away, while that very same savior thinks he will never teach his skills to anyone. The wind blows once again as the guide watches the hero depart. Stopping to gaze at the sun, Cain reflects on how it all happened 7 years ago, when he never imagined that a villain like him would go through so much hardship. Radiant, he remembers it was also before he met a pale heroine and jumped off a cliff, and that a hellish future awaited him. Far from there, in the present, a towering castle rises among white mountains of snow and ice. Known as the Road of the Kingdom, the inside of the castle, once a stronghold used by demons, was overtaken by sharp ice spikes, though still recognizable. The ruins were consumed by white and cold, with only the glories of the past remaining, but something was hidden beneath the snow. A pale hand belonging to someone with colorless hair emerges from the wreckage, someone waiting for another encounter to shake the villain's fate. The silver moon tells that the kingdom was once strong enough to swallow half the continent. Through a large broken stained glass window, she says that the gods, however, made sure that this kingdom met a terrible end. An empty and forgotten throne amidst the ice reveals that the name of this place was the Road of the Kingdom. In a flashback, we see pointy-eared people running in fear through the fire. Amidst the flames, a long white-haired girl with violet eyes pleads in her thoughts not to be left alone. In the present, we realize it wasn't the moon narrating, but the same girl from the flashback, buried up to her waist in the cold snow. She remembers being alone for a long time, until an unknown man came to her and dug her out. Unyielding, she kneels as she asks who that man is. Kneeling in front of her, the man in a blue cape says his name is Code Rel Spin. It is revealed that the man is actually Cain Ronard, and he asks back for the name of the white-haired girl. Still wondering who this guy is, the girl says her name is Eris and questions why he came to those ruins. Both kneeling on the floor of a hall, he asks if she's the only one left there, to which she replies yes. The man then removes his blue cape and throws it over the girl to shield her from the cold. He then asks if she would like to come with him. Surprised, she locks eyes with him and wonders what's up with this man and whether he pities her. However, she notices that the blue eyes of the protagonist are just as empty as hers. The girl begins to reply saying no, and that there's something there that belonged to her. But he cuts her off, saying that if she stays there, she'll turn into a vanilla popsicle. The girl replies no while recalling the chaos she witnessed on that night of fire and is overwhelmed by a storm of heavy, painful thoughts. A hand rises softly in the air. That same hand then rests on the girl's head, and immediately the thoughts vanish as she hears Cain say that she had survived. He adds that survivors must keep on living, withdrawing his hand from the girl's head as she seems frozen once more, even if she isn't. Eris is crying as she looks at her savior and asks him to take her with him. At first, he remains silent as he looks at the girl. He extends his hand, inviting her to take it, and says it's all right. Bathed in moonlight shining through the frozen stained glass, Eris takes the hand of our villain as he tells her she should speak respectfully to her elders. Far from there, in the sunny village of Sinar on the edge of the Michael Timmer region, someone asks if a stranger really knows what he's doing. Near a wrecked house, the one questioning says that even if the guy got a good deal on that pigsty, he doesn't think it's a good place to live with a daughter. The questioner and owner of the shack was Ben, and he didn't seem too confident about the buyers. Those buyers, revealed to be Eris and Cain, are standing in front of the house, and the man says the condition of the house doesn't matter. Turning to walk toward the building, our villain wonders what kind of madness it is to think she was his daughter, considering they didn't even look alike and she was a servant. Breaking a bit more of the house, the swordsman tells the owner that he needs a few things to make repairs, and Ben replies that he should call a professional. Turning to the man, he finishes breaking a wooden beam and asks for the tools. After all, the owner wasn't about to open his wallet to pay a proper builder, right? Putting his hands to work, our Bob, the builder in training, uses a saw to cut some wooden planks. He also hammers a few nails here and there, quite the little carpenter. Surprised, the owner seems pleased as he says Cain was a pro after all, and Eris is shocked by the fact that the dump actually looks livable now. As the one-man construction job continues, Ben tells the girl that it'll take a while and she could wait at the inn. Shaking her head, she says she's just fine hanging around there. To herself, the girl thinks she doesn't need to be there, but she'd rather stay, while Ben assumes she's just shy and explains he can't stay away from the inn too long. After a full day of labor, our protagonist finally sets down his hammer. He wipes the sweat from his forehead, realizing he's starting to sweat and probably should rest a bit. He then notices his servant had long since gone off to dreamland. Utterly shocked, he wonders how he's the one doing all the hard work while she sleeps like a rock. Approaching her, the man questions whether he should have just left her behind. He remembers what happened in the past when he arrived at the road of the kingdom castle hoping to grab some loot, only to find the place as cold and empty as an Antarctic winter. He walks into the fortress, looking around thinking maybe some street brats had already looted the whole thing. Suddenly, a glimmer catches his eye. He rushes toward it, just in case it's money or something of value. Frustrated, he's left speechless when he sees that under the snow and rubble, it wasn't gold. It was in fact Eris, buried and forgotten. Deeply saddened, the broke adventurer thought to himself that this wasn't treasure and wondered if everything really had been taken, while the girl slowly starts to wake up. The pale girl asked who he was. Cain introduced himself as Code Rel Spin and asked the name of the Snow Maiden. From here, we see the reunion from Cain's perspective, who, upon hearing her name, wonders if she might be an orphan. The man then asked if she was the only one left, and she nodded, which made him feel a bit hollow inside, realizing the place really had been picked clean. Pensive, he began reflecting that there was nothing left to steal, and that he was way too broke to retire, so there was only one option left. Throwing his cape over the girl to warm her, our protagonist asked if she would like to join him, and we find out his real intention was at least to gain a servant. Back in the present, he once again covers the sleeping white-haired beauty with his cape, visibly annoyed. Talking to himself, he says he was going to share the food he brought with her, but now he's going to eat it all by himself. Then he was all math genius mode like that one meme, confused when he doesn't see his lunchbox and wonders where his ham sandwich went. From a distance, he sees a cute little fox with his lunchbox in its mouth. After a long moment of silence, Cain yells that the furry thing stole his food. This scares the animal, which bolts off running, and our protagonist takes off after it, shouting at it. The little orange creature runs for its life with the big guy on its tail yelling for it to stop. What a sight. The fox pup dashes near some bushes, with the man now panting behind it. Finally, the swordsman manages to grab the little animal in his hands, but he's out of breath by the time he does. In a threatening tone, he tells the little fox that it made an old man run in the middle of the night, and that's gonna cost something. Terrified, the creature squirms and thrashes, making tiny fox noises, whatever sound foxes make, and the lunchbox falls. Before Cain can grab it, something else does first. Turning toward the bushes, still holding the little fox, our villain grows uneasy. From behind the foliage, a terrifying gray wolf stares him down, clutching the lunchbox tightly in its massive jaws. The man is paralyzed by the shock of seeing a giant wolf right in front of him, giving him a deadly stare, and the little fox looks just as panicked. It struggles even more, and the human tells it to quit squirming and not to try climbing on him. In a desperate move, our protagonist throws the little one toward the big one. The two almost dogs bump faces, poor things. Where's an animal rights group when you need one? Running like he's about to stop an execution, Cain rushes away as the animals fight over his sandwich. Elsewhere, a drowsy Eris wakes from her nap and wonders if she had fallen asleep. She realizes she hasn't had a single good night of sleep since the fall of the road of the kingdom. Imagine the neck pain. The girl wonders where that cape came from out of nowhere, but before she can think more, she hears someone telling her to get up. Looking up, the girl sees Cain standing right in front of her. The man says they need to return immediately and thinks about how he'd been running while she was having her beauty sleep. Sweeting bullets, he asks if she plans to keep slacking off, but she doesn't even listen. Seeing his condition, she thinks he's freezing to death and yet still chose to cover her. She says she's coming as she tries to get to her feet. With his back turned to her, he's grumbling about how that wolf ruined his retirement plans and that he can't even sell the shack now, while she's thinking she never asked for his kindness anyway. Annoyed, the man thinks about how that brazen wolf not only lowered the house's value, but also stole a fox pelt he found. Meanwhile, the girl, totally misunderstanding, wonders why he's been so kind to her. She wraps herself up in the man's blue cape. Reflective, Eris looks at the ground and thinks she really doesn't like him all that much. As the two walk together, Cain is plotting how he's going to deal with the wolf next time. In a kitchen, someone calls out to Eris, who's using a spoon to stir something in a large pot. Nervously, the innkeeper points to the same pot and asks if that's supposed to be food. Irritated, she says it's for when Code gets back and wonders why he's making that face. Sweating, the mustachioed man awkwardly gives her a hesitant, "Oh, okay." Slamming the lid on the pot, the irritated girl asks him where they wash the clothes and he's startled, asking if she wants to do that too. Snapping back, the angry girl asks if she can't wash some darn clothes and he tries to weasel out by saying he'd rather do that himself. Unbothered, the girl turns her back to him and says she's totally fine doing it. The man looks pretty uneasy and asks her to wait, saying she shouldn't go alone, thinking they should go together. Later on, while Eris stirs clothes in a basin of water, Ben tells her the house they bought was built by his grandfather when they arrived in the village. He helps hang the clothes she's washing and mentions that 30 years later, other outsiders bought the house too. What a coincidence, huh? Looking at a tattered, soapy shirt in her hands, the girl asks about Ben's grandpa, though in reality she's wondering why the clothes are so crappy. Ben explains that his grandfather is like a Swiss Army knife: explorer, hunter, forest ranger, world traveler. Bragging a bit, the guy says that when he was a kid, he used to sneak his dad's booze just to hear stories about his grandpa, while the girl silently wishes he'd shut up. Lost in his storytelling, the mustached man says his dad didn't talk unless he was drunk, and the girl just grabs the clothes and heads for the clothes line. As she hangs up Code's blue cape, she hears the man call out to her. She looks at Ben, who asks if those were all of Code's clothes, and she says yes. He gives her a slightly sympathetic look and says he'll check if he has any spare clothes to lend, something the girl doesn't quite understand. Later, we see them at a little cottage with a chimney in a forest clearing. A healthy-looking, bearded old man introduces himself as Grandpa, the forest ranger, and reaches out a hand, saying he heard they needed something. We see he's talking to Code, who shakes the old man's hand while thinking he looks strangely familiar and says Ben sent him. The swordsman says he heard Grandpa used to be a treasure hunter, and that he'd like to buy the old gear he used. The man says he doesn't use any of that stuff anymore, and since Code doesn't look like a brat, he can just take it for free. Cain silently celebrates the savings. Opening a door, the old man tells Cain he can take whatever he wants. The room is practically empty except for cobwebs and a few cleaning tools, and Cain thinks everything really does look ancient. Stepping further in, Code inspects the gear. He thinks the bow is practically a mummy but still works, and that the gloves look like they were made for climbing. Grabbing a weird red vial from a shelf, our hero recognizes it as a pretty potent poison. He wonders what something like that is doing in a remote place like this, and then something falls to the ground with a dull thud. Code notices that it looks like a crossbow and is a bit surprised by it. He thinks that a weapon like that could only belong to a major organization. A thought hits our villain's brain when he realizes the old man used to be a treasure hunter in the past. Just as the swordsman is starting to suspect that Grandpa might have been part of something related to the dragon, the old man returns to the little room with a box for Cain to use and carry the stuff. He nearly wets himself from the scare, quickly takes the box and starts tossing things, and while thanking the man and trying to act chill. Suddenly, the healthy old man seems to recognize Code and prepares to ask something. Internally panicking, our protagonist begs that he hasn't been recognized while turning to the bearded man and asking what it is. The old guy stares directly at Cain, and Cain stares directly back. There's insane tension between the two for a few seconds. Breaking the ice, the silly grandpa laughs and says he must be losing it, mixing everything up. Faster than Sonic, Cain hurries out of there while thanking the host. Outside the house, the fifth instructor is walking away when someone rushes toward him. Passing by, a young boy calls out for his grandpa, while the adult mutters to himself how, of all places, he had to end up here. Arriving on foot at his new home, the adventurer is greeted by Ben, who tells him to drop his stuff because they need to have a little chat. Cain says nothing, but he's definitely thinking that this can't possibly be another hassle. And he's right, and nearly dies of shock when he sees what the mustached man shows him. Looking at his clothes hanging on the line, completely destroyed, the protagonist stops breathing for a few seconds, thinking about how expensive and rare they were. The mustached man offers him some of his own clothes, but Cain doesn't even hear him as he caresses his ruined garments. While the guy's soul leaves his body in despair, the owner of the place says there's also something to discuss about the inn's kitchen. Instead of saying what it is, he decides to show the protagonist, who's still broken over the clothes. The two walk through the kitchen door, one more alive than the other. Inside, the scene looks like a war lost by both sides. So much destruction, it's like the tornado that took Dorothy to Oz stopped there first. Cain wonders what the hell happened, and Ben says he shouldn't worry about the food, but he will need money for repairs. Almost fainting and feeling sick, our favorite cheapskate hands over some cash to the innkeeper and thanks him with a forced smile. Still on the verge of collapse, Code says he's heading home, and the mustached man bids him goodbye. When he gets home, our furious man finds Eris chilling and mentally calls her a dummy. Calling her name, he thinks about how much money he's already lost because of this girl. He asks if she's made dinner yet, and she looks at him attentively. Proudly, she stands up and says it's obvious, she knows how to cook. We then see her serving up a gooey mess that looks like purple mush with random chunks in it. Our hero braces himself for his toughest battle yet as he faces the dish that smells like the dark side of heaven. Gathering courage, he scoops up a spoonful and shoves it into his mouth all at once. Outwardly, he asks if she doesn't know how to cook, but inwardly, he's already wishing he could throw up because it tastes like toxic sludge. Eris just says you throw everything in and mix. He sits her down and tells her to try it for herself, which she does, thinking it can't be that bad. Several long seconds of silence pass between them, and with both sitting at the table, he says he's going to teach her how to cook and how to wash clothes. Later, Cain finds a recipe she used to make dinner and decides to burn it. Morning light fills the inn where Eris and Kobe have been staying, and the smell of something cooking wafts from one of the windows. In the kitchen, there's no one but the girl, humming while stirring a pot on the stove, and the innkeeper sitting on a stool. Calling her name, the hesitant mustached man asks if that's supposed to be some kind of special soup. We see the white-haired girl stirring something greenish in the pot as she pauses to glare at him. While the colorful slop bubbles, she says it's obviously something special, but Ben points out she doesn't even know what it was supposed to be. Ben asks if he got distracted and she threw something into the pot without him seeing, like a garbage bag, and she replies that she threw in one of his underwear, but he just laughs. He says this is a business, he needs people to eat there and not walk out puking, and outside people think the house is on fire. The innkeeper says he opened all the windows to air out that stench, and that not even doing the dishes helps anymore. They'd be better off just throwing it all out, while Eris thinks about hitting him with a ladle. He suggests she try again tomorrow since she wants to impress Code, but she says she doesn't want to try anything anymore. He encourages the girl, saying she learned to make ice really fast, and this was her first time making some kind of soup. As he explains that cooking isn't easy, the food starts bubbling loudly, almost like a calf being born. He tries to stay focused, but thinks it's better to destroy the pot before it turns into a monster and swallows everyone whole. Eris can tell he's thinking about something else, but he tries to act like he isn't. Ben tells the girl that what matters is the intention and that Code will be happy. But then an unknown group barges in. A hooded figure calls for the owner of the place while grinning. The group is armed with swords, and the leader orders food and drinks to be brought to them, while the others try to breathe through the smoke hanging in the air. Ben tells them to just sit down and he'll bring everything soon, while the white-haired girl clearly doesn't like the new customers. The men drop their weapons all over and sit however they like. Thoughtful, the young girl wonders if they might be mercenaries. The innkeeper whispers to her that these guys are dangerous and she should keep her mouth shut, and before she can offer to help with the food, he says absolutely not. Faster than an arrow, the mustached man serves his new customers with impressive speed while she simply watches. Eris notices that the weird men are drinking lots of sugarcane juice and shouting that it's amazing, and Ben dances around with a pig on his head. While the girl stirs the pot, thinking about how fast the old guy is, she hears the men saying no one's going to find them there and that they should stick around a while. One of them replies that he doesn't want to spend a whole year in that godforsaken place just because of what happened with the Road of the Kingdom, and our protagonist perks up at the mention. Another says they only did well thanks to that mess, and the leader comments they're only in hiding because of that defeat, and the girl burns with anger at their laughter. One man says who would have thought they'd fall like a house of cards, and the others laugh, saying the plan was to deceive them, but they ended up falling all on their own. The group jokes that they should have stolen more from them, sold the women as slaves, and that rumors said everyone had gone to party with Michael Jackson. One of them jokes they'll get cursed if they keep talking, and Eris hears everything from the kitchen as she looks at the slop and considers serving it to them. Finally, one of the drunks raises another mug and says he has something to say. He comments there was something really off about that family, which seems to be the last straw for the girl in the kitchen. Something flies through the air and hits a spiky-haired guy square in the head just as he starts singing a pop song, leaving everyone in shock. They're kind of thankful someone put the guy to sleep, but also wondering who the hero of the night is. A small girl appears before them and tells them to apologize for what they said, and also for the songs they sang, and the men look surprised. Gritting her teeth, Eris demands again that they apologize. With a threatening shout, she orders them to do it immediately. Elsewhere, Cain suddenly opens his eyes with terrifying speed. He's in bed and quickly sits up, trying to understand what's going on. His head senses something is wrong, but then everything starts spinning and he nearly loses his lunch, feeling horribly nauseated. He trembles under the blankets and groans in agony, and we find out he's had his stomachache for days, partly his own fault. And most of it was because of the rotten food Eris kept making him eat. She even interrupted my narration to ask if I'd lost my mind saying that, but I'm just being honest. Once upon a time, not long ago at all, there was a white-haired girl who summoned a truly wicked dish and dared to call it dinner. The poor villain didn't want to waste the food because he had spent money on the ingredients, so he ate every last bite to grow strong. Little did he know that if this were the Bible, that would have been the almost Last Supper, because it led to a brutal case of food poisoning. And then there were his clothes, which were ruined by the same girl, and thanks to the lack of warm layers, he caught a nasty flu. And that's how the story went. A few days had passed in that miserable state, and Cain couldn't help but curse the girl under his breath for knocking him out for days. In his room, medicinal herbs and towels were scattered around, and he thought about how he could have ended up being interviewed by a game show host if he weren't such a skilled villain. His sword had been used to chop wood, and the fireplace burned all night with that and the last scraps of his expensive clothes. Still dizzy, he thought about how she had destroyed him without even being a hero. What a devil. Pausing to think, Cain noticed the house was far too quiet, more than he liked, and assumed the girl had either gone out or was preparing something. He lay there quietly in bed, still sick and deep in thought. Turning in bed, our protagonist muttered that he didn't care what was happening. He convinced himself that he had to rest, and that he wasn't going to set one foot out of bed, even if something fishy was going on and his stomach was crying. Standing up in bed again, the instructor thought in silence and eventually decided he needed to eat something. Getting up and stepping out of the room, he thought he'd grab something simple and quick to eat. Looking down the hallway, the man hesitated. He thought the corridor looked like the light at the end of the tunnel, and he really didn't feel like walking through it, and it was all dark anyway because Ben was stingy. Walking down the hallway, he chose to just go before passing out from hunger. Approaching the end of the hallway, Cain started thinking to himself and came to a conclusion. Lowering his head, he admitted he'd let his guard down because of the girl and wondered if he'd made a mistake bringing her along. While he was lost in thought about how his retirement plan had gone down the drain, shouting echoed from the inn's common room. Just before grabbing the railing, our protagonist heard someone yelling, calling someone else a stinky brat. He grumbled at the noise, and everyone in the room suddenly went silent. Locking his eyes on Eris, the so-called stinky brat, she, along with everyone else, locked eyes on him. Everyone froze, completely silent. With a soft voice, Eris asked what he was doing standing up while tension filled the air. Imposing even while sick, the instructor looked at the rowdy men in the hall, and their leader returned the stare with a smirk. His men were nervous, and he wanted to know who the hell Cain was. Thinking hard, the cowardly leader wondered how long the guy had been standing there, and if he was a knight or some mercenary. Absolutely terrified just by the sight of the sickly guest, the gang leader thought that if they slipped up, they'd be toast. The scar-faced guy even considered resorting to their secret weapon. With a deadly look, our protagonist seemed to take in every little movement the men made below. They all trembled in fear, like tiny, shaky little dogs. Behind the men, the small, white-haired girl told Cain not to stop. Brave, she clenched her fists and declared that she was going to beat those thugs up herself. The ugly guy looked at the girl with contempt and let out a few laughs. He turned to the man on the second floor who had just arrived and asked if he was the brat's dad. Paralyzed with fear to his very core, the scarred man told Cain to stop acting tough and come down before he lost his temper. Cain simply stared in silence. While walking down the stairs, he thought about how it had all been a domino effect, from the diarrhea and the flu to standing in that hall now surrounded by mercenaries. Back to back with the girl, our villain thought about how he just wanted something to eat and didn't even bring his sword, and maybe he should apologize. Cain figured he was about to get his butt kicked, while the men stared him down and asked why he was getting involved if he wasn't even related to the little troublemaker. With a look and a slight nod, like a game of charades, the swordsman suggests the girl distract them so he can make a run for it. The girl looks hesitant and scared as the man conveys his message. And in the end, she says she understands his look and that she won't do anything since he asked her not to, leaving our protagonist shocked at how bad she is at charades. Trying to start a conversation, the bandit leader admits they're mercenaries and asks what Cain is. Firmly, our hero says he's not obligated to tell a gossip anything, especially since he's just an old retired guy who doesn't do much. The man then tries to learn the instructor's name, but again gets no answer as our protagonist doesn't want a loudmouth knowing who he is. The boy band crew gets riled up seeing their boss getting shut down and calls our hero a flop with no solo hits. They also say they'll boycott him and take all his fans and the girls too, but neither she nor the boss seem into the drama. Turning to his henchmen, the leader says there's no need for all that activism and that he'll use the secret weapon, causing them all to tremble in fear. Our hero's instincts scream that something bad is coming, though he doesn't know what while the scar-faced boss mutters that the boy band is exhausting. He goes on saying it's hard to control so many weird guys at once that are always trying to pull something, while Eris clings to Cain and both of them eye the loudmouth. Showing off his shiny brass knockoff jewelry from Shein, the guy grins creepily and says that defeating the two of them will keep him at the top of the group. Clinging to the instructor, the girl asks if that cheap trinket does any magic. Going full psycho mode, the ugly guy says it's the most rocking magic of them all. Then he activates his technique and orders it to finish them off, unleashing a surge of purple energy from the jewel. That same purple force charges toward our protagonist at high speed, just like a Formula 1 car, and they stand still. Terrified, the girl screams for mercy, while Cain only clenches his teeth before the impact. A massive show of purple lights erupts like a grape juice explosion all over the place. A heavy silence fills the room, and once the dust settles, the entire space is utterly wrecked. Wine barrels leak everywhere, which is definitely going to be a huge loss for Mr. Mustache. The boy band guys are frozen, shocked by how their silly fight escalated. The scarred man stays still, waiting to see if there will be a counterattack. Smirking slyly, he calls out to his opponent. Eris opens her eyes, fully expecting to be having lunch with Bambi's mom, and realizes she's completely unharmed, right as the bandit leader asks who Cain is. With eyes sparkling in admiration, the girl reflects on how magic has evil origins and how humans fear dark magic users. Her savior stands frozen in front of her like a wall, and she wonders how he doesn't even flinch in front of a mage. He must be even weirder. Shaking his head to brush off the dust, our villain doesn't seem too pleased with the attack. Internally, we see him have a mini meltdown, thinking he almost ended up starring in a soap opera. We learn he only dodged the blast because he ducked just in time, and the attack zipped over his head like a frisbee. He didn't realize it was that dangerous. Neither of the protagonists says anything, but Eris is clearly confused, and he figures she survived just because she's small, when in truth, she used a shield without even knowing it. Our pale blue-eyed anti-hero seizes the moment and asks the enemy if that was really all he could do. The cocky bandit says our guy just got lucky dodging and now wants to act like a big shot. The instructor uses his best poker face and asks if the guy thinks he's bluffing, to which the scarred one replies, "What if he's not?" Confident the fool took the bait, our hero hears him ask why he's so calm and sees him reaching into his cloak and starts to explain. The enemy tenses quickly, preparing himself, thinking Cain's about to pull out a massive hidden blade. Cain's cloak sways as he pulls out what he was looking for, a glove. He says he trusts in nothing but his unshakable pride. Both Eris and the enemy are left wondering what kind of nonsense that lunatic is even talking about. One of the mercenaries' henchmen loudly asks what kind of madness all that pride was, but the ugly one raises his hand in the guy's face to shut him up. Smirking mischievously, our scarred captain says he never thought he'd find a free night in a backwater like that. Everyone present is dumbfounded by the suggestion. Even Eris seems a bit suspicious of the whole thing, and only Ben looks sad about the destroyed tavern. Some men widen their eyes in shock, stammering in fear. Eris furrows her brow like she doesn't quite follow the conversation. Standing still with a serious face, Cain hears people yelling, calling him a free knight. We learn that free knights are basically an old wives' tale about a group of men who had no leader, yet were an organized force. They were basically like the Freemasons. The only thing known for sure about them was that they were as skilled as monsters. We see on Cain's glove a symbol similar to that of the Free Knights organization, a crest with two crossed swords in front. The bandit leader starts trembling all over, sweating cold. Our hero stands as unshaken as ever, simply waiting to see what happens next. To everyone's shock, the ugly one says in a velvety voice that they should forget everything that just happened. One of the henchmen says he's not getting the message, and the captain replies that there's no other way since they're in the presence of a free knight. He tells them to obey. Surprising everyone, our girl finally speaks up and says she's still waiting for an apology from the loudmouths. Without saying a word, Cain draws Eris' attention as he starts walking away with calm steps. As she stands there alone, he tells her to come with him. She doesn't move, just stays lost in thought about everything. After much hesitation, she turns around and begins to follow her protector. Mockingly, the bandit leader tells her to take care and calls her a brat. As he gets ready to take another sip of his barley juice, he says the knight won't always be there to save her. She climbs the stairs without replying, deeply affected by everything, while Ben is left to deal with the rowdy thugs. Long steps make the wooden floor creak, and soon a heavy door closes shut. Standing behind the door after re-entering his room, Cain stares intensely at the floor. Shifting his gaze around the room, he prays alone to the demon saints, the protectors of villains. Quietly, our protagonist says he's going to make a very special request to them. With adrenaline pounding in his chest, he says he hopes those same demons end up at a Luisa Sonza concert to learn what real punishment feels like. The man wonders if it was too much to ask for just a snack, if it really took sending a gang of mercenaries to become a heart attack and stop him from eating. Thinking of the group's leader, he emphasizes the question of whether it was necessary to send a mage on top of it all. Cain recalls he almost got into serious trouble for having left his sword in the room, but luckily his bluffing and acting skills saved him. He also pauses to reflect on the gloves he put on. Laughing with relief, our hero says he just grabbed them from some random spot because he had nothing else to wear, and he's thankful that his past was useful for once. His stomach and intestines twist and growl, and he concludes it's best to rest, stumbling clumsily toward an armchair. He drops his weight into it, relaxing and sighing with his eyes closed. Opening them again, the man decides to review what just happened. Images begin to flash through his mind, like when he tricked the mercenaries with the glove and the free night story. Cain concludes that even though using that wild card was risky, it was a relief to see the bandits didn't know much about the knights. Remembering the guy with the ring, he reflects that he needs to be careful. If someone finds out he's not a real knight, he'd be in danger. Looking at his feet, he thinks he could easily escape through one of the 9 planned escape routes. But as his belly growls like an old tractor, he admits that doing so would mean saying goodbye to his peaceful retirement. With tears running down his face from sheer nerves, he scolds himself for thinking like that and curses the bandits for messing with the life of such a kind-hearted villain. Clenching his fists, the instructor thinks all he wanted was a little food and wonders what he did wrong. And as he trembles, he doesn't even notice Eris entering the room. The creak of the door makes him turn toward the girl quickly, face stern, but she looks gloomy, and he thinks his mistake was bringing this walking disaster along. While meditating through controlled breathing, he thinks about how pathetic those men were too, for picking a fight with the girl who now watches him in silence. The protagonist tells himself to handle all of this like an adult at the exact moment Eris calls out to him. She promptly scolds him for getting involved in her business, which triggers a silent tantrum in him, thinking he never should have saved her. Before calming down, the man thinks he's going to end up in the gutter if he keeps this up, so he puts a hand on his face to get a grip. The girl opened her eyes wide when her protector asked if she'd never move on from the place she came from. A brief silence falls over them, and the girl tries to form a sentence but only manages to choke on her words. He stays quiet while the girl thinks to herself that it's impossible to forget that place as flashes from the past come rushing back. Shocked by his nerve, she just stands there staring at him the whole time. Eris tells him to repeat it to her face if he has the guts, and Cain replies that he'll say even more from where he's sitting, comfy in the armchair. Gripping the arms of the chair tightly, he tells her to bury all of that deep inside because her memories don't matter if they only keep her stuck in the past. Looking at the girl with firmness but empathy, the old man continues, saying that everything that happened can't be undone or changed. Looking back at him, Eris hears him say she needs to live in the present, and then she bursts into a deep laugh. Having a brief laughing fit, she asks if she heard him right and remembers the hall where she was found. Deeply shaken, she yells at him. How could he tell her to forget? How could he say something like that? Calm as a horse before kicking, he hits her back with a retort like it's a political debate, asking how long she's going to carry the weight of that tragedy on her shoulders. Overwhelmed by a heavy, suffocating feeling, she just stares at him with a threatening glare for a long time. With tears streaming down her face, she draws his attention to herself so he might understand. The girl starts to say that he only talks like that because he doesn't know what it was like. But the longer she looked at him, the more she realized that maybe it didn't matter if she explained it to him. Meeting the instructor's cold gaze, she thought maybe he'd never understand her, and maybe no one ever truly would. Standing there, swallowed by her pain, she thinks that only she knows what it's like to lose everything and be alone, always wanting to scream in agony, heart aching with loneliness. With heavy, hollow eyes without saying a single word, the girl stares at Cain. She then turns toward the door and calmly walks a few steps toward it. Reaching the handle with her hand, Eris stops just before opening it. Looking at him over her shoulder, she calls him code. Serious, the man listens as the girl asks why he brought her with him. He hesitates, and only after a few seconds does he ask her if she really needs a reason. The girl clenches her teeth, completely fed up with this guy. Before slamming the door with all of her strength, she yells for him to forget everything and calls him a big old peanut head, and he's left stunned by the drama. Calm, the man gets up and tells himself he doesn't care. He just wanted to give that ungrateful brat some advice, and she doesn't even see the value in that. Standing, he shrugs and says he'll leave the little princess alone then. Besides, he needs to finish the renovation. Time passes, and outside, the sun sets as our protagonist keeps working on the roof of his house. While driving a final nail with a hammer, the man concludes that it's good enough now. He brushes his hair back with one hand, and striking a very stylish pose with a hammer in hand at sunset, he thanks God for finally finishing. Cain ruins the charm by remembering that the girl was upset over the little things he said, even though he brought food, got ignored by her, and did all the work himself. Before calming down, he even considers letting her sleep in the doghouse they didn't even have. He thinks about the door to her room, the one she didn't open for him, and realizes she hasn't come out in days. Thoughtful up on the roof, he comes to a conclusion. Decided, he says that even though she's already inside the house, he's not going to let her in just like that, and that she should reflect on everything he's done for her. Sitting on the roof, he says that at this rate, he'll even save on food, and then he notices something more interesting. As he watches the sunset, our villain acknowledges that things are actually going pretty well, that he's at a good distance from the village, and that the forest offers some nice advantages. The man takes a few sips of water while praising himself for getting such a great house at a rock-bottom price and for having excellent taste. From up there, he notices Ben walking over, looking quite agitated. Calling out to the mustached man, who's out of breath from walking so much, he asks what he's doing there. He tells the protagonist that there's a bit of a problem at the inn. And just as he's about to explain why, our fluffy mustached friend lets out a scream worthy of a horror movie. Trembling with emotion, he's shocked by the results of the renovation, saying the house looks like a prize compared to the dump it used to be, and Cain says he just gave it a little touch-up. The mustached man says touch-up is an understatement, and after the instructor asks if he came just to look, the guy gets back to the point and tells him to hurry over to the inn. As the dark-haired man looks at him, waiting for an explanation, the only thing the innkeeper says is one name, Aris. With panic spreading across his face, the man starts to sway cold. A memory flashes back to the day the instructor was sitting in the armchair giving Eris advice. We see the girl sitting on the bed, hugging her knees with her head down, locked in her room. Lifting her head and looking at the window, she reflects on how she's been stuck in sadness during all these passing days. The girl notices the sunset while wrapped in a blanket. The sun looked like it was dripping and the sky looked like orange juice or a wildfire, whichever is easier to picture. Pensive with a face swollen from crying, she thinks that must be her fate too. Remembering the throne in her home, Eris thinks she should have burned and vanished just like her kingdom. We see now that the room is empty. She seems to have gone out through the window. There are also some clothes scattered around in an overturned bag. Outside, we see Ben looking worried and trying to stop the girl from following the group of mercenaries heading to Healthy Grandpa's house. She remembers the mocking laughter of the men talking about her people and decides she's going to make them pay. Blackbirds fly over the treetops. Through the forest, strange growling noises can be heard. We see the group of mercenaries in a clearing, bullying someone we can't quite see. The bandit leader looks at the man who was shoved against a tree and says that every day brings something new to learn. He seems slightly deranged up close and tells the others to take a good look at the man they've cornered. He's bruised from the push, and the bandit leader says that man used to be the best dragon hunter around and had disappeared a long time ago. We then realize the man being attacked is Healthy Grandpa, and his name is Kinner T. Lamb as the old man asks how they found out. Getting closer to the gray-haired man, the leader tells him he should watch what he says even when drunk, and Kenner says he knew one day alcohol would betray him. Looking closer, we notice Kinner is wearing a shiny ring, and the ugly one explains he was the first hunter in years to find the treasure of Dragonia. Grabbing the old man's shoulder, the scarred guy asks where the rest of the treasure is. With a face smeared in tomato paste, our grandpa says that yes, he did find Dragonia, but he wasn't able to enter it. The scarred captain then asks if he couldn't enter or simply didn't want to. Grandpa asks if he fell out of his cradle as a baby, saying even kids know there's a guardian in Dragonia that makes even the best hunters disappear. The greedy mercenary says he'll find out for himself. Sitting on the grass, Kenner realizes the guy doesn't believe him, and the villain tells the old man to just reveal where the treasure is so no one gets hurt. Sighing, our buff Santa Claus agrees. He says he hid the map in the house he built when he arrived at the village. In other words, the same house Cain just bought and renovated. The men get real excited when they hear there's a map. As the men listen to him explain that he sold the house, a sound catches everyone's attention. They all turn quickly toward the source of the noise. The group leader places a hand on his sword while scanning the trees attentively. Spooked, he orders one of his armed men to go after whoever was spying on them. This extra steps through the grass. He draws his sword as he walks and begins to sweat. After walking a bit more, the man stops in front of the dense forest. Raising one of his hands, our extra seems determined. He hears the sound again and shouts, frightened, asking who's there. We see sharp teeth chewing on something until it cracks. We realize it's a fox that just walked out of Fight Club. Shocked at how much noise a fox can make, the man stands frozen. When the creature growls at him, the guy questions whether that's even a fox. The boss asks what it was, and the henchman replies it was nothing serious. He returns to the group, and we see that, in truth, Eris is well hidden nearby and was nearly spotted. As she listens silently, her heart pounding, she thinks she never imagined the grandpa was such a big deal and wonders about the map. Remembering the house Cain was fixing, the girl thinks maybe that's the same house mentioned as the hiding place for the Dragonia map. Worried about her protector, she hears the bandits ordering Kinner to take them to the house. From behind the tree, she hears everyone running off into the distance. Pensive, our protagonist thinks about the danger Code is in and that she should warn him. But then she hears her own voice whispering in her ear that she doesn't even have a reason to help him. Reflective, she listens to her thoughts saying they're strangers to each other. Images of golden knights from Dragonia appear in her mind, the last treasure of the dragons from the era when demons and gods battled. Thinking about the jewels and gold, it said even those creatures desired the treasure of Dragonia. She imagines her own hands reaching for that wealth. Eris then concludes that if she had all that dough, she could rebuild her home. Widening her purple eyes, she thinks that if she had the kingdom road again, she wouldn't be alone anymore. Flashes of the last night on the road come back to her, her friends running away saying they'd handle it. She remembers begging them not to leave her. The girl recalls the desperation as she pleaded for them to stay. Next, she remembers being rescued by the man and when he introduced himself as Code, his serious face asking if she wanted to join him. Eris then squeezes her travel bag tightly. Another image of him advising her to leave the memories behind pops into her mind. And then, trembling against the tree, she says she needs to stop thinking about him and that he has to fend for himself. Lifting her head, our girl decides that only one thing matters now. And that one thing is to go after the map and beat the loudmouth mercenaries to a pulp. The sound of slow footsteps fills the quiet forest. Iris, looking gloomy, walks on her way. Suddenly, she notices a fallen tree and a man trapped underneath the trunk. Getting closer, she sees it's one of the mercenaries. She steps over the trunk and doesn't offer help, thinking he was just unlucky. A bit ahead, she sees another mercenary taking a dive into a river, which she finds odd. A few more steps and she finds another one taking a nap near some rocks. Stopping at the edge of the path, she looks down and sees a fourth bandit below, and then wonders if all this could really be a coincidence. As she walks thoughtfully through the forest, the protagonist remembers the guy under the tree and calls him Yuno. The one ahead, diving in the river, she names Doze, and thinks that if one is a coincidence, two is bad luck. But then she finds the one napping by the rocks and calls him Traz. And then came Quattro down by the cliff, and Eris wonders just how much bad luck that really is. Standing still, she feels very uncertain about what lies ahead. A scream takes her by surprise, and it seems to come from the group of mercenaries she was following, as she hears someone insulting an old man. Following the noise, our girl rushes off to see what's happening. She runs like Dash from The Incredibles through the trees. Out of breath, she stops behind another tree. From where she is, the girl can see a few of the bandits, and one of them holding the buff Santa Claus grandpa. From afar, she watches Ben's relative trying to defend himself and asking why the guy is wrinkling his shirt. Next, he says there's no way he took out the mercenaries back there. Then the bandit flies into a rage and demands, who else would it be? Everyone stands alert, questioning who else would dare mess with their crew. Our poor grandpa tries to defend himself, but they yell in his face and push him. Kinder falls back onto the ground as the bandit says they've been way too nice to him. Standing in front of the strong old man, the scoundrel draws his sword, saying he seems awfully confident that the map will keep him safe. Raising the sword to strike, the unnamed extra says the old man's about to learn his place. The girl knows she has to help Grandpa, she can't let them hurt him, and she shouts for them to stop. But before she can do anything, a lightning-fast bird drops a massive poop right on the cocky bandit's head, and he collapses to the side. The rest of the group watches the guy fall unconscious to the ground and go on high alert. The group leader says that was disgusting. Then he immediately orders everyone to hide and spread out, and all his henchmen follow his command. Some rush to trees farther away. Others dive under some bushes. The leader begins charging his magical ring and says that Diarrhea Bird better show itself fast. He prepares to search for whatever attacked them, saying no one wins alone against the whole group. But suddenly, a red explosion bursts behind him. Slowly, he turns around as he hears strange sounds. The scar-faced brute hears crashing noises and cries for help from his men. Finally, one last scream echoes, and both the bandit captain and healthy grandpa look toward where it came from. Hidden, our protagonist is shaken, thinking that even though that thing just saved the old man, she still doesn't know what it is. Charging his magic ring again, the leader prepares to strike back. Clenching his fist tight, a purple aura radiates from the ring along with a curse that escapes the leader's mouth. Furious, he casts the Great Juice spell he used against Cain back at the inn. Aiming the purple blast, he commands it to destroy the enemy that burst into red across the forest. After attacking, the leader freezes, mouth wide open. He and Grandpa sit in the clearing staring at the trees, the magical Grape Juice spell just obliterated. Behind the bandit, a noise rises again, and he turns around as fast as he can. Using his magic again, he tries to annihilate the unknown figure. We see that this time he almost hits Eris by accident, but she's shielding herself with her barrier magic. Elsewhere, Kainer dodges the man's wild magic by throwing himself to the side. The leader flails his arm like a whip, attacking everything around him. A huge explosion echoes through the forest. The leaves rustle as the wind picks up. Smoke from the spells rises, making a whistling sound. Our scar-faced captain is out of breath after flailing like that. From behind a tree, miraculously still standing, Eris lowers her shield spell while watching the panting man. He grits his teeth in fury, demanding to know who's there. Yelling the question even louder, he lifts his head with determination. He roars at the enemy not to hide and to stop being a coward. We see the buff Santa Claus grandpa sitting down, all tired, and the mercenary says that if the enemy doesn't reveal themselves soon, he'll finish off the old man. The girl is thoughtful and notices the man is clearly eaten up with jealousy. As she clutches her bag tighter, afraid, she thinks it's not normal for someone out in the middle of nowhere to be able to take down mercenaries that quickly. While the bandit captain keeps yelling empty threats, the girl keeps wondering who it could be. The man's still ranting to himself, and our dear Eris says there's only one person she can think of who could pull all this off. Up in a tree nearby, we see Cain watching closely. Suddenly, he uses his hand to squeeze something orange and furry with great force. Obviously, I'm talking about the fox, the same fox that scared the men earlier and that he threw at a wolf a few chapters ago, now back to get revenge. The man groans in pain as he pulls his head out of the creature's sharp jaws. With his head dripping strawberry juice, he whispers to the fox that she's way too bold and that he's going to make a scarf out of her. Hearing some chewing sounds, the man notices the big old wolf that nearly got him last time is down below, snacking on the mercenary's heiress, found knocked out. He tells the fox and the wolf to beat it because he's way too busy to deal with them right now, and the fox tries to take a few nips at him. We hear Cain's scream echo through the forest. In a flashback, we see Cain's reaction when he found out the girl had run away, and he's clearly shaken, almost depressed, without a doubt. After hearing the news, he heads to the room and sees the mess she left behind. Still quite gloomy, he thinks it makes sense. Kids spitting on the plate they ate from. Bouncing with satisfaction, the villain celebrates not having to feed two mouths anymore. But his happiness ends when he realizes she took all the money. If you look really close right there in the bag, yeah, that pocket's empty. Thinking to himself, he imagines there's a chance the mercenaries provoked the girl, or maybe she went after them on her own. The instructor thinks about the little bottle where he stored his fortune, and that regardless of how it happened, what matters is she vanished. Preparing his sharp wand, he concludes that he has to do something. Shaking the frustration, our protagonist thinks the only option left is to turn them all into pumpkins for Cinderella. Remembering the faces of that crew, he figures they're just a bunch of punks who need a good smack. They shouldn't be too much trouble. Thinking of a big drawing of a dragon, he considers setting up traps like they used to do in treasure dungeons for this group of so-called geniuses. Our protagonist thinks he could chop some trees to make them fall on someone, or maybe spike the river water with laxatives to wreck them when they go to quench their thirst. Another idea would be to pour aviation oil along the path to make them slip and fall. Banana peels would work too. Or push someone down a hill so they roll through all the mud to the bottom. In the present, our protagonist reflects on how they didn't notice any of this until about 5 of them were out of commission. But he had expected it to be easier than that. Our scared captain is still fuming and out of control with his flashy little ring. From above, the instructor looks at the enemy and thinks that after his tantrum, things just got a bit trickier. Thinking about the furry duo, he realizes how they ruined his golden opportunity to finish off the mercenary. In a fit of rage, Cain throws the fox at the wolf again to make them both disappear. The noise causes the only surviving mercenary to turn toward the animals and fire magical blast at them in vain. Our villain thinks he should have turned them into clothing, but ended up being too soft and let them go. Thinking about his bow, he remembers they were also responsible for ruining it. He wonders what else he can do, what options are left. Observing the panicked mercenary, he figures that with his busted bow, he can only shoot maybe 2 more arrows, and Scarface is way too worked up. Grabbing an arrow from his quiver, our dark-haired hero decides to change tactics. Sighing, he speaks directly to the enemy, asking if the missing person came here often. From behind the tree, Eris is surprised to hear the familiar voice, while the bandit grows tense just from hearing someone speak nearby. Suddenly, an arrow is fired. It sticks in the ground right in front of the mercenary, breaking his frenzy for a moment. Our dear Cain asks if the guy is really that eager to fight him, calling him by the name Cheras, and the scoundrel asks how he knows who he is. Disbelieving, the 5th instructor asks how dumb the man is, since there are very few mages in the world, and you basically gave his powers away for free. The bandit can't tell where the voice is coming from because the villain is using a magical necklace that makes his voice echo. Murmuring in thought, Cain looks at the arrow's position. Very sharp, he realizes the difference between where it landed and where he aimed. Turning his gaze back to Cheras, he notices there's a clear shot, since the man's standing out in the open like a little goat in a field. Getting ready to fire again, our villain plans to end this once and for all. The mercenary is completely thrown off, asking what all of this is about. Before Cain can shoot, he's interrupted by the bandit asking why he's going after them. Startled, he questions why the guy would even ask that. After all, they stole his retirement money. We quickly see just how much Cain is in love with his retirement savings and all the romantic things he plans to do once he has it back. Surprised, the bandit doesn't understand when our hero asks, "Where is it?" Eris, quiet and hidden, hears the man ask what the instructor is talking about. A little foolishly, she listens to the guy explain that she vanished along with them when they left the inn, and that it wasn't a coincidence, and thinks he's looking for her. While Cain explains that the reason for the theft doesn't matter, the girl scolds herself for having thought about betraying him. Crying with emotion, she hears the man saying that he stole what mattered most to him, and determined, he says that makes them enemies. Begging for mercy, Cheras is more nervous than ever. Before he can keep pleading, an arrow hits the tree right next to his face. Shaking in his boots, the mercenary thinks the arrows are being missed on purpose just to freak him out more. But in truth, our protagonist is extremely frustrated with himself for missing again. So annoying. Super irritated by Cain's audacity, the bandit grits his teeth. As a gust of wind passes, he then asks the archer if he doesn't want to know what happened to the girl. Both she and the villain are very surprised by that choice of words. Threatening, Cheras says that if he wants to know where she is, he has to stop hiding right now. Charging his cheap little ring again, the mage gets ready. Code stays alert to the man's threat. Very alert, in fact. Eris realizes he's trying to trick her protector into thinking they captured her. Remembering their last interaction, the girl doubts that someone with a heart as cold as his would fall for something like that. Unshakable, she's almost completely certain he wouldn't reveal himself over a bluff like that. And then something lands gently on the grass. With leaves swirling in the wind, Cain now stands face to face with Cheras. The bandit laughs mockingly, pleased that his strategy worked. Steady, the instructor says the bandit's name calmly. With a deadly stare aimed at him, the villain asks where Eris is. Laughing with scorn, the mercenary looks him straight in the eye. But our villain clearly doesn't find it funny. Catching his breath after laughing alone, the mage mocks him for being such a gentleman. With a wide, maniacal toothpaste commercial smile, he flashes his ring and says he's impressed with the archer's behavior. The clown says, once a free night, always a free night. And Cain responds only with a death stare. Laughing a bit more, he says it's actually kind of cute. Still hidden, our girl hears the trash myth say that the chivalry was exactly what led them all to ruin, and she's completely shaken. On the verge of tears, she remembers again the first time she met Code, when he introduced himself and invited her to come with him. The girl recalls being wrapped in his cloak and wondering what was wrong with that human. His cold eyes also come back to her mind. The last conversation they had before she ran away also returns, him sitting in the armchair, and she realized then that he seemed like someone who'd lost everything too. Tears run down the cheeks of our dear pale girl. Suddenly, she trembles all over as she realizes something. As the memory of her friends running through the fire on the Kingman Road replays in her mind, she understands that he had lost everything just like her. The image of the two of them holding hands for the first time appears, and she understands that's why he offered help to someone who had nothing. Covering her mouth with her hands, the girl thinks that in return she left him behind. From where she is, she can see the mage insulting Cain, saying he can barely stay alive out there in the middle of nowhere. He's so full of himself he even steps on a tree branch just to make a dumb sound effect. What a doofus. The girl watches the growing tension between the two adults and finally makes a noise they can both hear. After hiding for so long, now our protagonist finally seems to have spotted the girl. But unfortunately, Cheras also sees her. Nervous, he realizes his bluff about having the girl as a hostage just went straight down the drain. The mage thinks he needs to run, he won't win against Cain, who he believes is a loyal knight. The scoundrel concludes that if he can't beat him, there must be another way. Focusing his gaze on the girl standing between them, the mercenary decides the only way is to hit what's precious to him. Pointing his hand with a magic ring at her, he fires the purple blast. Snapping out of her thoughts, the girl looks toward the attack. Cain is very worried about what's about to happen, but doesn't think he'll make it in time. We see our protagonist just inches from being swallowed by a massive purple blast. With a sharp little eye, the crazed mercenary shouts that he's about to score a goal. Eris has her eyes wide open, bracing for the impact, and then we take a quick little pause in the story to understand why the villain was acting like a hero. Option A, he genuinely cares about the safety of little Eris with the shining eyes. Option B, maybe it's for the safety of our beloved grandpa who'd been missing for a while now, probably hiding, listening to the grown men argue. And both would be very surprised to learn that clearly it was neither A nor B, it was just hero behavior. In reality, our bright blue-eyed villain just wanted his money back. We get a snapshot of the two men facing each other. And then the focus shifts to the great mage who definitely needed some serious therapy and maybe a hug. With his sharp gaze, our protagonist notices that the opponent is already at his limit and only a very savvy villain would catch that. In his mind, a childish doodle helps him realize he needs to be careful, since an out-of-control mage burns everything around, and that would include his money. Our dark-haired man shudders at the thought. Looking at his own feet, he decides he needs to play the enemy's game. Extremely reluctant, Cain pretends not to have noticed the girl and asks the man where she is. Closing his eyes as the day begins to darken a bit, the instructor already has a great plan in mind. Thinking about the man's ring, he remembers that magic is all about stealing a bit of demonic power, so there's a major weakness when it comes to mages. Recalling the guy's many deranged expressions, Code remembers that they have a 600-second time limit to use their magic. Proving he's great at math, he does a few quick calculations and guesses there are only a few seconds left before that limit hits. A bit calmer, he notes that the clock is still ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. But Eris revealing herself at a moment like that kind of changes everything. When only 2 seconds were left, that was exactly when Cheras chose to attack the girl, and by association, Cain's precious retirement fund. As he looked toward the girl about to be blasted into next week, he realized he had to do something to stop it. Rushing toward her, our villain had to think very fast. He drew his sword quickly while running. Like a street cat, our agile man leaped, trying to reach her in time. He swung his sword at the last moment. Cain then managed to use the blade to block the magic from hitting the girl. Crackling sounds echoed through the forest, which rustled with the force of the deflected blast. Under the moonlight, we see the instructor's hair shimmer. Eris is in someone's arms where she opens her eyes and realizes she's not in the afterlife. She then realizes she's being held by Code. Looking up at his face just above her, the protagonist calls him by the name she knows and hears him say he finally caught up to her. With her wide cat-like eyes fixed on him, she thinks about how he must have been betrayed and lost everything, and that his eyes are still so cold. Yet she notices there's a bit of relief now in the eyes that look at her, and indeed, he's thinking that he's glad the girl is okay. We then see that his relieved gaze is actually locked entirely on the bottle with his money, not on the girl at all. While our villain thinks about how happy he is to have his cash again, the mage asks if his name is Code Relstein. which catches our guy off guard. Shaking with emotion, the mercenary asks what he's doing in a dump like this, saying no one's heard of him since the fall of the Knights. Totally shocked, we learn from the bandit that the fake name he's been using is actually the name of the leader of the Knights. Eris looks at her savior in complete surprise. However, our villain is totally expressionless upon hearing that. His eyes go blank with shock, and all he wants is to go home. The girl then asks, "What do you mean you were the leader of the Free Knights?" And the bandit doubles down on his question about what Code is doing there. It's already night, and a breeze passes while the girl watches her savior. His cloak dances in the wind, and she wonders again, how could he be the leader of the Free Knights? Both Cheris and Kenner are also staring at him in total shock. Looking up at the dark sky, our protagonist is completely serious in the face of it all. Answering the mercenary's question, he says, "You're the one who said the knights don't exist anymore." Nervously, the scarred guy stammers that yes, of course, he did say that. Then he shouts that he can't believe Code is after the treasures of Dragonia, and wonders aloud if that's because he wants to rebuild the knights. The girl thinks the enemy's words make a lot of sense. Of course, that was her savior's plan all along. Glancing at him from the corner of her eye, she reflects that she also wanted to rebuild something, and maybe Dragonia's riches could serve them both. Eris acknowledges that she can no longer return to the past, but if they could, neither she nor the man would be alone anymore. Our duo of protagonists is caught off guard when the mage says he'll help them with that. Cheris says that if they share a little with him, he'll cooperate and also help rebuild the Knights organization, and that they should be grateful a mage is offering help. Totally caught by surprise, Cain is left speechless while the girl stares at him with curiosity and anxiety. Trying to speak, he can do nothing but stammer. The man thinks about the peaceful life he wanted in retirement, sleeping in a cozy, quiet little house. After a moment of thought, he shakes his head. Our fifth instructor says he has no intention whatsoever of rebuilding the Knights. The bandit shouts in shock and asks, "What do you mean, Mona?" And the girl wonders if she didn't quite understand that right. Our villain moves the sword in his hand, and with the moon as his witness, he tells the sorcerer there's nothing left to rebuild. Completely tense, both Cheris and Eris hear him ask if by chance he had magic that could bring back the dead. He then adds another question, whether he had the power to turn back time. Standing beside the paladin, the girl thinks he's much stronger and braver than she is when facing those emotions. She remembers the feeling of being buried under sorrow and regret. Looking at the human, she acknowledges that clinging to the past is a waste of time. Closing her eyes, the protagonist shudders as she concludes it's just carrying unnecessary weight. Reluctantly, she reflects on something she's always known deep down, that even with all the dragon treasure, she couldn't bring anyone back to life nor reverse time. She imagines her hands dirty because she had been clinging to that with all her strength. Code's hand gently touches the girl's shoulder. Eris is pulled from her dark thoughts and looks at him, who just shakes his head, and she thinks he's saying that empty hope will only drag her down further. Stepping into character, he turns to the mage and says he can't join them because it doesn't even look like the guy bathes. The girl stays really quiet and wonders if she's understanding this as some kind of coded message just for her. And Cain just sighs, extremely tired and unaware that she's understanding way more than she should. The bandit then asks what the heck he even wants with the treasure, and he says the guy can keep the riches, he doesn't care. The scarred guy trembles and says he can't believe what he's hearing. Then the bandit starts to freak out again and charges his magic, yelling that he won't fall for his plan to deceive them and keep all the treasure for himself. The girl watches them calmly, and our villain says he literally just told the guy to keep the treasure. He doesn't even care. She's deep in thought about how the instructor understands her really well through that self-made speech of emotional growth she invented. She observes the man's back is kicked fluttering like that of a great model, and concludes that the mage will never understand what they went through. Breaking the tension in the girl's train of thought, Cain tells the unwanted guy to go fetch it alone and bring back the money to boost his retirement fund since he wants to share so badly. Totally unhinged, the mercenary says he knew Code was just messing around and prepares to use magic on him. From behind a tree, our beloved grandpa hears the madman telling him to disappear along with the rest of the knights, to which our villain responds that it was just a joke. Kenner makes a sound behind the trees and draws Cheris' attention, who turns toward him. Noticing the old man far off, he uses purple magic to try to stop him from escaping. Our protagonist watches with nervousness. Forming a purple chain around the former adventurer's neck, the idiot yanks him forcefully toward himself. Eris is very distressed by all of it. Threateningly, the bandit says the old man has to stay with them to show where the treasure map is. Moving his sword, our dear villain seems to be preparing for something. Cheris notices the movement, but with each passing second, the guy gets crazier and asks why the knight is acting so heroic. Cain then replies that he's not being heroic at all. While the old man coughs from the assault, the man thinks that sympathizing with the weak is a hero's thing, not something a villain like him would do. Cautiously observing the enemy, he realizes the guy is giving away all his weaknesses for free. What a wonderful lottery. Pensive, the fifth instructor thinks he's going to end up self-destructing like this. He takes a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he's just inches from our scar-faced captain's face, telling him he's far too greedy and it will be his downfall. The girl thinks about how fast he moves, so quick and sly. Our dear man takes another step, very serious and threatening. He says he hopes that's not all the evil he's got. Cherez is left speechless by that swift arrival and deadly stare. Our instructor says that if that's all the wickedness he's got, then he'll take every bit of it from him. In a desperate blunder, the madman uses magic to throw Kinner at our protagonist. The throw is spot on. At least the bandit's aim is decent. In yet another desperate move, the man with the magic ring tries to blast them again, but Cain dodges, taking Kinner with him. The old man is surprised by the speed of the movements and nearly loses his slippers, but all goes well. A bit dusty from being tossed around, the forest guard looks at his savior with admiration, and maybe a bit of surprise. Wielding his sword and his demonic purple lightning, Cherez charges at the men like a rabid dog, while our villain awaits with weapon in hand. The bandit tries to slice our protagonist into pieces, screaming like a lunatic, but the instructor ducks at the perfect moment. Taking advantage of the opening, he strikes too fast, and the mage's hand wearing the ring didn't even get to complain before flying off. It lands on the ground with a quiet thud. The ring's owner stares at it, so far away from him. He goes wide-eyed with panic. He's lost his jewel. Very, very nervous. Our scar-faced captain screams that he's nothing without his trinkets. He then hurls his sword toward Cain. Cain, in turn, just tilts his head slightly and the blade sticks into a tree. Cherez ends up grabbing his ring from the ground, frantic. Healthy Grandpa and our villain both look at the insane scared man, who's shouting magical commands again. The protagonist's blue eyes stay locked on the man. Now holding the magical jewel in his other hand, he channels magical energy in a dangerously unstable way. A light show of purple beams surrounds the mercenary as Cain watches, unable to do much. Crouching down, the bandit gains momentum, and then he launches himself high into the sky with incredible speed, almost touching the moon while our villain still watches him. Running over, Eris joins our protagonist, who silently sheaths his sword. The girl, very curious, finds the man's calmness strange and wonders if hitting the same person twice goes against his principles. In her mind, the Free Knight's symbol flashes, and she concludes it must be some kind of honor code he follows. From afar, we see the mage using his cape like wings to fly away, and Eris is not okay with him escaping. Getting ready to act, she's sure that if he leaves now, he'll come back for revenge at some point. Extending her hand forward, a bluish aura appears as she invokes the divinity of despair and storms. A small marble begins to form in front of the girl's hand. She lifts the spell we're seeing for the first time. Then she aims precisely at the enemy flying toward the moon and fires. A second before impact, we see Cherez looking back in panic. Sometime later, we return to the forest, where someone gives thanks. We then see that it's healthy Grandpa getting back on his feet and telling Cain that he's really grateful for what he did. Charming, our villain, says he only did what had to be done. But deep down, he thinks the man could express his gratitude with a lot of money in return. The old man says he's not sure it'll be worth anything, but he'll pay somehow. He then offers the map to Dragonia, but the savior doesn't even let him finish and tells him to move on from that story. The old man doesn't understand at all why he said that, and the man replies that he couldn't care less about some treasure legend. And firmly, he warns Ben's grandfather not to drag anyone else into that crazy obsession of his. Stammering after being caught off guard by that attitude, our kind grandpa doesn't really understand and asks what he's talking about. Yet it freezes at Cain's response, who says that whole Dragonia story is just a fairy tale for scammers and greedy people, and that it isn't real. Sighing, looking defeated, the old man asks if he truly believes that. He trembles with disappointment and eventually ends up agreeing with Cain. Turning to leave, the former adventurer reveals that the man who was with him when they discovered Dragonia said the exact same thing. Our protagonist stays silent as he listens to that and the name of the companion, Krayar Striker. The old man walks off into the distance, murmuring that he doesn't understand why Striker would have entered Dragonia then. Quietly, the dark-haired man watches the other man leave. Eris then calls out to him, gently tugging on his cape to get his attention. She then extends her hand to the man, giving him the pouch with the items she had taken to escape. He doesn't seem very thrilled by it and wonders what she's trying to do. Taking another second to think, he wonders if she expects him to forgive her after all that drama. Remembering the money she's giving back, he tells himself that yeah, he can let it go this time. Turning to leave, he tells her to come along, thinking he can't leave her behind or else the heroes will come after him. The girl looks at him with admiration. Then she chooses to walk beside him back home. Some time passes and the villain wonders when they managed to walk so far. What a long journey. Silent, Eris starts to spiral into anxiety, thinking she caused too much trouble, and that he must be really angry. The girl's eyes turn to him when Cain says her name. Standing in front of the house, completely renovated and shining, he tells her that this will be her new home. Utterly stunned by the sight, she wonders if this mansion is really the same dump they found on their first day in the village. Looking at the house again, the girl wonders if she heard him right when he said it would be her house. The man tells her to get ready for bed because it's already late, but in truth, he's the one about to collapse from sleep. The house is all bright and brand new, leaving Eris totally speechless. Mouth agape, she wonders if what she's feeling is guilt, joy, or sadness. Placing a hand on her chest, she decides not to name the feeling. Remembering once again that same night on the road's fall, for the 50th time, the protagonist thinks about how much she wanted to go back to the past. With that dream completely shattered, she stands still and concludes that it was just cowardice, really stubbornness. She repeats the words to Code, that this is their house, and internally she thinks she won't care anymore if she loses everything again. Focusing on her savior, the child reflects that even if she loses him, it won't have been in vain. The girl calmly observes the moon above them. She turns back, thinking about her kingdom. Her eyes shine with joy as she decides to let go of the weight of the past. An image of her smiling friends crosses the girl's mind. Then we see a crowd of those same friends and people behind her, as if their spirits were watching her, and she would carry only the memories. Turning around, Eris decides that the past is truly past. It's over. She walks beside Code toward her future. Someone coughs and spits red, screaming in pain. Bandaging his wound by himself, Cheris mutters through clenched teeth that the wind blast hit him out of nowhere. It couldn't have been just a breeze. He recalls the girl aiming the attack in his direction and concludes it was definitely magic. Remembering when he was hired by the Kingdom's Road, he realizes he saw that same magic back then. The bandit refers to that spell as so powerful that no other mages could replicate it. Thinking of the girl from his past, he also realizes that the energy mixed with the wind was different. It was actually the magic of the Demon Lord. Getting up, all sore, he knows there's something different about Eris, and can barely believe he now has information on the most powerful magic in the world. Laughing like a kid in a toy store, he says he's going to sell the information for a fortune and that they'll regret messing with him. Then something surrounds him, a kind of nasty smell. The man covers his nose with his hand and asks what the heck that awful stench is. Looking in his dirty hand, he notices that the tips of his fingers are turning blue. He goes into shock as he remembers the name of a poison known to do exactly that, called Galenha. Just kidding, the name was Colorful Demon's Game, and it was made with a bunch of mushrooms. Totally consumed by fear as his hand turns blueberry colored, the bandit remembers that the victims of that poison vanish along with its creators. Trembling, he refuses to believe what's happening. A flashback of the fight with Cain runs through his head. The mercenary recalls using his magic to fly away. Thinking of his opponent's malicious grin, he wonders if the guy had poisoned the sword he used to strike him. Looking around, Cheris asks himself how someone like that could have access to such a substance. With smoke coming from his mouth, the sorcerer takes off running at high speed in search of an antidote. Stopping suddenly, he comes face to face with a still unknown figure, who says they're glad to have finally found the last of the mercenaries. Holding a sword in their hands, the person hears the one-handed man ask how they managed to track him there and replies that all they had to do was follow the stench. With his final words pleading for mercy, the man screams the name of his executioner. We then see that the unknown figure is none other than Serena. The blonde-haired girl sheathes her sword as Cheris collapses for the last time. She looks up, and the moon stares back. A breeze passes through the clearing, and the young woman reflects that she's almost where she wants to be, in Sinar. We get a flashback of the heroine raising her sword for the first time, and we find out 10 years have passed since then. We see the girl fighting a half-human, half-spider monster while she tells us she's been through a lot, but now has a bit of a reputation. We also learn that she was very successful in resurrecting her family, and is known as the Knight of Paradise. Pensive and back in the present, she doesn't seem all that satisfied. As she continues on her path, she thinks about how certain past events still weigh heavily on her. Sometime later, our protagonist arrives near a building. We get another quick flashback of the girl hearing from Ben that there was a man who looked like the one she was looking for, and that his name was Code. Placing a hand on her sword, she wonders if the mustached man gave her the right location for this code or if it's a trap. The heroine knocks on the door of the house, worried it's an ambush. She knocks again until a voice tells her to come in, and we see a man resting in an armchair. Serena doesn't see his face, but what she can see does look very much like the instructor. She clenches her teeth, extremely nervous about what could be a reunion. Placing a hand over her chest, she seems in a way relieved. From the armchair, the man trembles as he hears her say it's been a while since they last met. Closing his eyes, we understand that the man is indeed Cain, and that he was having a pretty unlucky day. Thinking about the horrible food he had around, we learn that he chose to starve since the kid living with him was useless in the kitchen. Because of that, he was feeling awful, until Eris finally made something edible, but it turned out to be toxic mushrooms. We get a flashback of the man vomiting and the girl running to the market, and he reveals that thanks to Eris, he's always getting sick. Sitting in the armchair, he thought it was the little girl returning, which is why he said to come in, to punish her. However, his eyes go wide when he realizes it's not the white-haired girl, but a tall blonde woman. With his danger sense exploding, the man goes on high alert as he looks at the girl. Just by looking at her, it's clear she's a heroine, but due to the intoxication, he can't see clearly enough to recognize her. Trying not to panic from not having any weapon on him, Cain wonders if maybe she's after Eris, but quickly dismisses that thought. Still seated in the little armchair, he thinks about what the woman said about it being 10 years since they last saw each other. He runs through the list of people it could be and then concludes she's number 3 on his danger list. Deciding to stay calm, the man asks why the woman is there. This catches the heroine off guard. What does he mean? Why? Firmly, she replies that she came to settle the 10-year debt between them. Drawing her sword, Serena thinks she can't exactly say she came to return the favor because what he did was far too great to repay. As she walks toward the man, he becomes completely convinced he's about to be sent to the afterlife right then and there. The villain decides he needs to buy more time, so he compliments the visitor's sword. He is surprised that she stayed attached to a cheap sword for 10 years when she explains that it was he who gave her that weapon. Looking at him, the young woman thinks that this is the sword that both connected and separated them. Gripping the hilt tightly, Serena remembers it symbolizes her determination and that through it, she achieved all her goals. Raising the blade, she thinks there's only one thing left to do. The blonde then begins to lower her sword in a single motion, determined to offer him her life. But she is interrupted by the man, who says that death is useless. The two stare at each other again, and she says the debt she owes him can only be paid with her life, to which he replies that it's overly dramatic. Looking calmly at her, Cain inwardly pleads for mercy, and knows he has to find a way to live, so he says repaying a debt with one's life is cowardice. That hits our heroine squarely in the mind, sending her spiraling into deeply thoughtful philosophical thoughts. Quite the philosophy, huh? The sword trembles in her hand as she thinks about the last 10 years she spent with it. Once again, they look at each other in complete silence. Enjoying being taught again after so long, she asks him how someone can be forgiven in life. The villain throws the question back at her, asking how long she plans to act like a child, though in truth, he had no idea how to answer. Taking the man very seriously, she says she'll keep living then, and thinks that she's no longer a child. Decided, she announces that she will stay by Cain's side to make it up to him. In another dramatic gesture, Serena ends up planting the tip of her sword into the ground and kneeling. She then makes a vow of loyalty to him, promising to remain by his side until the end. Ending on a glamorous note, the girl swears it on her sword. Completely shocked, the fifth instructor now recognizes the girl but is still in disbelief that she didn't come there to finish him off. He has absolutely no clue what's going on, but what a mess of a misunderstanding. Totally disconcerted, Cain can't believe what's happening. Of all the scenarios he imagined, this was not one of them, and he imagined a lot, including the girl eating paper with chopsticks. He's trembling at the thought of having to keep his composure. But on the bright side, at least he was out of danger of getting slashed. Reflective, our villain admits even thinking about this whole situation is terrible. Seeing the woman kneeling, the guy thinks he doesn't quite get what she wants, but at least she sees him as some kind of savior. Still, as his memory reminds him, she's the nutcase who took out that absurd threat in a single night. Reflective, he also knows she could always decide to end him, because hey, hero and villain, it's like Tom and Jerry. Acting with enviable naturalness, our dear swordsman points down the hall and says the first room is empty if she wants to use it. Getting up, the knight says she understands the order. Anxious, he warns her that he traded his sword for a peaceful life a long time ago, which makes the girl stop in her tracks. Turning to him, she asks if that's true, and he says yes. Then he terrifies the blonde with the condition that if she wants to stay there, she must also give up her sword and forget her clan. Delivering a bluff-filled speech, Cain keeps listing the things she would need to give up if she wanted to stay. Hesitant, she nearly stops breathing when he says she must become a civilian instead of a warrior. Nibbling her lip, she thinks how giving up her role would be far worse than giving up her life. She feels like her world has turned upside down, poor thing. She trembles all over when he says that from now on, she'll be a sweet, quiet housewife, a real girly girl. The heroine recalls the first time she ever held her blade again, and though she's very hesitant about all this, she says she accepts the terms. Finally, the man says that if she's without clothes, she can use the ones he stored in a musty box, and she thanks him for the kindness. As she walks away toward the room, the doofus chuckles to himself. He thinks about how clever he was and that the big oaf fell for the plan like a duckling. With a simple strategy in mind, the villain knows that without a weapon, she wouldn't be able to defend herself even if she were insanely strong. Laughing maniacally on the inside, he just calmly watches the woman hang up her cloak. She, in turn, thinks it makes no sense to hesitate at a time like this. Looking at her former commander, she wonders if she's been living like an armed zombie these past years. Some time passes, and we briefly see the interior of Serena's new room. A chest creaks open, revealing a few pieces of clothing inside. Looking at herself in the mirror, the woman holds her sword but finds the new clothes very strange. Touching her reflection, she barely recognizes herself dressed like the girl from the Sound of Music poster. She recalls the instructor from a few minutes ago and realizes he still has a lot to teach her. As she crosses the room, the protagonist wonders if he's going to teach her to laugh again, or if it's truly possible to be happy without her sword. Speaking of which, the time has come for Serena to store it in the chest with the clothes, but she seems hesitant as she kneels down. After caressing the weapon and placing it inside the chest, she looks at her faithful iron companion and thinks that if he managed to do it, she will too. Finally, she closes the lid of the chest with her belongings inside and remains in complete silence for a few minutes, thinking about how her feelings of guilt and remorse seem to vanish. Sighing in an attempt to relax, the heroine thinks maybe the man sensed her burden the moment he laid eyes on her. She stands up and brushes off the long skirt. Walking to the small wash basin in the room, she looks at herself in the mirror again. Smiling at her reflection, the woman believes he knows exactly what she needs right now. Caught up in her own thoughts, she smiles even more and thinks she really can't afford to let her guard down around the know-it-all. Some more time passes, and now it's nearly sunset. Finally returning from the market, we see Eris arriving with a bag. We see that she's thinking she's going to get scolded again for having napped on a nearby hill and lost track of time. Someone calls out to the girl, and she turns to respond. Ben, the innkeeper, asks if she's coming back from the market, and she sharply replies no. Then she asks why he wants to know, and he says he thought she had gone to buy something for the guest who arrived earlier. The word guest makes the girl's heart skip a beat. The mustached man tells her that a woman came to the inn looking for code and left right after he told her where to find him. The little girl gets completely lost in thought as he adds that the woman was a stranger who had just arrived in the village. Eris's heart pounds in her chest as she imagines a rude visitor showing up unannounced at someone's house. Iced with panic, she fears it might be a door-to-door sales rep from Jequiti. Turning around and channeling some of her wind magic, the girl gets ready to bolt. Like an arrow, she dashes off using magic toward her home. Her quick footsteps echo through the quiet forest. As she speeds through the woods, she wonders if Code is okay or if he's already bought some terrible lotion. The girl draws closer and closer to the house. Nervous, she trembles as she reaches for the doorknob. Slowly, she pushes the door open, hoping it's not too late. The creak of the door draws Cain's attention, and she feels relieved to see he's not in the living room with anyone and doesn't seem to be smelling of cheap perfume. The man gets up, pointing out that she's late and that something new happened, which makes the girl's eyes widen with tension. Pointing to the cloak the newcomer hung up, the man tells the girl to be more cautious from now on. Clearly unsettled, the man sighs and says they have a guest, mainly because he doesn't want her upsetting the heroine. Trembling with apprehension, the little one asks who the guest is. Just as Cain says it's someone from his past, one of the house's doors creaks open. The blonde was stepping out of the room just as the man tells the girl and her to introduce themselves. Smiling warmly, Serena introduces herself by name and says it's an honor to meet the young lady. The other two are taken aback not just by her warmth and charm, but also by how well she pulls off the poor villager look. Cain remembers how she was the last time they met and is startled by how much she changed just by putting on a country girl's skin. As the women greet each other with a handshake, he thinks that as soon as possible, he's going to send Serena to interview Pelle. Serena feels a bit uneasy with the way the girl is staring at her, especially because Eris, who introduces herself politely by name, doesn't hide her discomfort. It's morning at the protagonist's house, and a scandalous sneeze shakes the walls. Walking through the house's corridors, Eris wonders what she should make for lunch. Yawning, she says thinking about the new housemate kept her from sleeping well. Going down the stairs, the white-haired girl questions why Code let someone so weird stay around. Stopping for a second, she becomes suspicious about the relationship between her savior and the newcomer, wondering if they were premium plus lovebirds. Entering the kitchen, the small girl notices something smells really good. She steps in further, already suspecting who's to blame for that. Looking at the stove, the girl confirms her hunch that it's the blonde woman cooking something. Irritated, the younger one frowns and then asks what Serena is doing. Turning to her, our golden girl stirs the pot a bit more. Smiling charmingly at Eris, she replies that she's just making breakfast, nothing special. The girl bites her lip out of nerves. Suddenly, the younger one snatches the ladle from the woman's hand. Positioning herself in front of the big pot, she tells the heroine to leave the food to her, and Serena thinks she wasn't bothered to be cooking. Before leaving the kitchen, the woman says she'll be in the dining room in case she needs anything. Stirring the pot, the girl thinks the other one is a pain in the neck and that cooking is her job, wondering if she should put a laxative in her food. While juggling some plates, she considers that there are other ways to get rid of someone besides giving them diarrhea. Suddenly, she stops walking when something catches her eye. A very colorful and well-served dish is already on the table. We see Serena finishing up arranging the fruits and bread. The cheerful woman is happy with Eris's effort, while Eris herself is visibly frustrated, wondering when the woman even had time to set all that up. We get a good look at the food. Now that's an edible plate. Eris is practically bursting with envy, thinking she really doesn't like the newcomer, while the newcomer doesn't quite get what's going on. The door opens again and both turn to look at the man who just entered. It's Code carrying a juice bottle. He places the bottle on the table, pulls out a chair, and tells them to sit down as well. They both agree. Serena takes a distant glance at the bottle their host brought. She murmurs the name of the product, Demonic Rain. We find out it's a cheap, low-quality juice made with prison labor, but at least in large quantities it serves as an antidote. The heroine remembers that he used to drink a lot of that stuff to build resistance to lethal poisons. She herself used to take a few sips when he wasn't around. The man then calls her by name. He proceeds to offer her some of the drink. She doesn't hesitate to take the glass, but asks why he's offering, and he explains it's been years since he had company to drink with. Not suspicious at all, the dear woman says she'll join him then and thinks there's nothing better than this to celebrate their reunion. The man calls for a toast to lost swords. She echoes the toast, and the two clink their glasses. The girl watches everything in silence. Her eyes grow weary as she wonders what's going on. Feeling excluded, the girl, who could use a lot of therapy, just sits quietly. Eris thinks that it's the first time since she's known him that she's seen the man so open and friendly. Watching the two and feeling increasingly left out, she concludes she's interrupting their precious time together. At the table with trembling hands, staring at Cain drinking his juice, the girl admits that her judgment has been totally off because of her anxiety. The villain finishes his juice. Serena moves to do the same, standing up and slapping both hands on the table. The child doesn't understand why she's feeling this way. She then slaps the glass out of Serena's hand, overcome with jealousy. The glass flies and crashes into the juice bottle, hitting it dead on. Both fall to the floor and the juice bottle shatters completely. Serena's face is splattered with juice from her slapped glass. In fact, even the dear woman's blouse gets stained with grape juice, and Eris looks at her with a slightly regretful expression. The man is so tense that not even Wi-Fi signals could get through. He lets out a high-pitched squeal and wonders why on earth the girl would do something like that. Let's take a quick pause here to rewind and catch some details of this whole mess. With teary eyes, the villain thinks about his plan to poison Serena, which just failed spectacularly. He'd even made a little checklist of the steps. There were only 4 very quick ones. Trying to look on the bright side, he thinks he's already used to the crusty-eyed brat ruining his plans. Another possible reason for his high-pitched squeal was that the villain spent his entire retirement stash, the dragon tear bottle, to make the poison. Crazy dragon tears are so powerful they can even defeat, as you'd imagined, dragons. Many have tried to acquire the substance, which is practically impossible to find. Almost crying with rage, he thinks about how he could have sold it to a member of royalty wanting to eliminate their family, or to a terrorist. But Eris ruined everything. But the real reason for the scream was the pain of drinking that poisoned juice. Even after taking an antidote, his stomach was still burning like hell. Trying to keep a poker face, Cain asked the heroine to go wash up. After all, even skin contact was dangerous, and he didn't want his plan exposed. As the woman stands and goes to clean herself, the girl who just had a tantrum stands frozen, thinking how frustrating all of this is. Clenching her fists tightly, Eris reflects that she hadn't meant to lose control like that. Feeling a chill of regret, she thinks there's a lot she wishes she could say, but for some reason, she just can't. Looking at the door Serena walked through, she wonders if maybe she did that for a reason she herself doesn't even understand. Noticing Cain's defeated expression, the little one clearly has some kind of Electra complex or something like that. The man slams both hands on the table as he stands, and that makes Eris flinch. He walks over to her and raises one hand. That hand moves toward the girl's head, and she closes her eyes in fear. The child is scared he's going to punish her somehow for always messing things up. Surprisingly, the man just gently rests his hand on her head. Looking at him, the girl still doesn't quite understand what just happened. She tries to figure him out by maintaining eye contact, wondering if he's forgiving her. In his mind, we see Cain grinding his teeth, the vein in his neck popping with rage. While dreaming of squeezing the girl with all his might, the man concludes that he will never forgive the crusty-eyed brat. Fuming, he remembers the plan to sell the dragon tears for a fortune after getting rid of the heroine, and now he's lost everything. Still resting his hand on her head, our villain thinks that maybe if he sells her, he can recover a bit of his retirement fund. Pulling his hand back, the man realizes he's so tired he can't even bring himself to scold her. Cain drops his weight back into the chair and looks down at the soup in front of him, thinking even it got splashed with poisoned juice. Taking a moment of silence and looking more closely at the bowl, the villain thinks it's a huge waste of food. The girl stands beside him, a bit restless, watching him. She thinks about how he doesn't seem mad about the bottle or the juice that she totally ruined. Smiling just a little, the dear one thinks he's only sad about the soup, which she claims she made even though most of it was the blonde's doing. Eris tells him to hold on and wait a bit. Then she heads to the kitchen door, saying she'll bring him more soup. Finally, alone in the dining room, our male protagonist is trembling in the middle of all that chaos, thinking she should clean everything up first. Elsewhere, we see a foggy mirror and hear the sound of water running. A wooden bathtub is overflowing with water. In the bathroom, alone, our heroine is taking a relaxing hot bath. She scrubs her hair, lost in thought about having accepted the girl's anger instead of running from it. Remembering the incident, she concludes that if she owes her life to him, she also owes something to Cain's family. Hugging her knees, she thinks maybe she deserves the girl's anger for everything she's done. Serena thinks that maybe she was rushing to believe life would be sweet just because the 5th instructor took her in after all this time. She scoops some water into her hands. She admits to herself that the only thing a crazy monster like her can do for him is pretend to be normal. Sometime later, the freshly bathed woman returns to the dining room and finds everything clean. Obviously, the man had done it. She apologizes for ruining their breakfast, to which he replies that she's not the one who should be apologizing, even though he definitely thinks she is. The only reason he didn't say that out loud was because he figured she beat him up. He feels hugely relieved to see there's no trace of poison on her skin. Otherwise, the whole plan might have been exposed, and he asks if she's okay. That catches Serena by surprise. She replies that she is, and deep inside, the villain is nearly exploding with rage, even though he tries to stay calm. He lost his entire retirement stash, his stomach is still burning even after taking an antidote, and she didn't even feel a tiny stomachache. It just wasn't fair. Our heroine calls his attention and he narrows his eyes, focused. She says she suspects the girl doesn't like her very much, and the man can't even muster a relevant thought about it. Completely dumbfounded, he wonders how she could suspect that and not be sure, considering the girl threw grape juice in her face just minutes ago. The instructor thinks things could get complicated if the newcomer loses her patience and chops Eris to pieces, and now his only shot at money would be selling the child. Trying to stop his second retirement plan from going down the drain, he navigates the situation by asking if it bothers her and explains that the child is an orphan. Serena is surprised by the revelation. The man confirms it's true, and that he's been traveling with her ever since he found her. The blonde nods, thinking he was kind to the girl too, just like he had been to her 10 years ago, and the villain is pleased to see the plan working. Still uneasy, he reflects that a hero's heart is always soft, but he still didn't know if things were settled or if she pulled a sword on the kid. Just as he's wondering where the girl went, the door creaks open again and both adults turn to look. Cain is already traumatized whenever he sees the girl. Eris is holding a tray and stops to glance at the two of them. The youngest one begins serving them, while Cain thinks it's a good chance to resolve everything since all three are present. The girl turns to him when her name is called. The protagonist tells her she shouldn't treat anyone like that, especially family. Both women freeze in surprise when they hear him order the child to apologize to Serena. The woman looks at the girl, who averts her face. Then she glances back at the newcomer, and both women think about the word he said, family. Stammering, our little one tries to start forming an apology. After much effort, she finally says she's sorry. Serena chuckles and tells her not to worry. Eris thinks about how she's never had a family, and stands up awkwardly when the woman says it's all right. As she finishes serving and takes her seat, the girl reflects on how she never imagined having a family and always thought of herself as forgotten. The three share a meal together, and the girl thinks about how even a small family brings a warm feeling to the air. A spoonful is taken from one of the soups. A trembling hand holding a full spoon begins to move. Cain is incredibly nervous. They didn't even get through breakfast, and all of this had already happened, and it's only going to get worse from here. He puts the spoon in his mouth hesitantly and silently vows that next time the blonde's going down the drain. Some time passes, and now it's winter, with snow-covered trees all around. Eris stands while Cain sits in a rocking chair. She's totally confused and asks him what he means. The man repeats himself and tells her to get ready so they can go out for a bit. Outside, we see heavy snow on the rooftops and around the house. She wonders why he wants to go for a walk in weather like this. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.